Deep subject.
It was, anchors and talk, exactly where everything should be and where it should be versus where people put it. And, we had lots of discussions about that.
Context, did that get brought into it? The context of where the should move to? I mean, in the sense of, would you do it for a live versus pre-record?
Well,
versus
it's just in general,
versus...
broadcasters expect certain targets, and the average. What the discussion yesterday was the fact that the average of a spoken word event is much different than the average of a music event, because the music is constant. And so if you keep them both under the same set of rules, the music will sound low and the talk will sound high, because of the gaps in between create a different average level. So anyway,
that's brilliant. By the way, you may have
energy
turkey
versus intermittent energy.
You may have turkey vulture issue. You may have turkey vulture issue, or your Wi-Fi.
Oh no, it's not turkey vulture issues today. It's we're gonna either this is gonna go great, or I'm gonna disappear. Oh, looks like I'm still here, so that looks good. I had to reconnect. I was trying to connect the Mac Mini again because that's what I had set up, and yeah, that didn't work. It was just too many pieces. That's the nice thing of an iMac. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna bring the iMac over, and then I lost power to the room. I don't know exactly how I did that. So a series of unfortunate events that we're all broadcasting now and talking about. It's just great. Let's see here. I got to just propose this in. All right. Thanks for putting up with that. Welcome to Office Hours if you're watching. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see a link down below. You can actually join the conversation. If you are here in Zoom and looking at all this fine panel that is built up, and you're wondering, how do I become part of it? You get here early. You can get here as early as 5 o'clock in the morning if you want to. But you don't have to, though. 6:40 is the cutoff. Between 6:40 and 6:43, we'll start our mic checks. Once we start the mic checks, it's kind of, this is the panel. So you have to be here before that. Now, we make one exception on Saturdays. If you're an educator, you can come in. We will stop this at 7:55, even though we started late. We're going to try to I've gotten a little loose about when we go from 1 hour to the next. I'm going to try to tighten that all back up again. So at 7:55, we're going to open it up for mic checks for the educators, and then we'll start as soon as they're done. So we may go a little heavy, but it'll be doing that. But we'll finish questions by 7:55. 7 to 8 is general questions. That's what you have in here now. If you've got a question about education, put edu : in it, because we're going to talk about education in the second hour. And then Sunday, we just keep talking the whole time. Monday is kind of a wild card. This Monday, we're going to talk about HDR, a lot of HDR, and broadcast and rules and engagement and different color spaces and everything else. Tuesdays are audio. Wednesdays are video. Thursdays are kind of artist driven. Fridays are event driven. We're going to talk about ZoomOSC, because we talked about it a little bit yesterday, and I wanted to talk about it more. So, and then Saturday is going to be, again, education. So that's what we got coming up over the next week. And I bet you we have some questions, Bill.
We do. And in point of fact, Hasmukh here in the panel has the first one, and it's about Zoom rooms. And everybody seems to be talking about this a whole ton. He starts, I spent a few dollars on a Zoom or on a room. There are many varied components to a Zoom room. Can the panel provide a high-level overview? Some manage meetings only through a Zoom room. Why? Grant, often here in the panel, has zillions in a meeting with a Zoom room, and Hasmukh says, I need a master class. I think this is a popular topic.
I'll give a quick overview, and then people can kind of fill in where I miss something here. So a Zoom room is different than a regular, because it's really designed to be in a conference room. So when they say Zoom room, what it was built for is not what we use it for. We use it for our broadcasts, but it was built so that you could have 2 or 3 screens in an office, and you could put up different information across those screens. Someone could be presenting on one screen. You'd see a full picture on another screen. You see the gallery of people in Zoom on another screen. Or I only have 2 screens. What do I do with that? I only have 1 screen. What do I do with that? So what it does is it lets you figure out how you would display those different screens in your conference room. And it's important to think of a Zoom room as a conference room, because that's the way it was designed. Now, we've done something with it that we use it for broadcast, but it was designed to be a room, a physical room. And the reason it has a Zoom rooms don't really have an interface. You have to, they now have a web interface that you can use, but up until recently, you had to have a tablet. Why? Because you were in a conference room. You had to have a tablet sitting on the desk that you were going to, hit and say, okay, I'm going to answer it, or I'm going to jump into this piece, or whatever. But you were in a physical conference room. You didn't have access to the computer that was running the Zoom room. So that's why that external access is there. There you can see guys showing it. There's your little room. And that can be an iPad. It can be, we use Samsung. I actually use Samsung tablets for this because they're cheaper. It's $110 to go buy a Samsung tablet, and it runs just as well. So anyway, so you can, in the web interface, if you go into Zoom rooms and you go into there and you click on a room, in that web interface, you can control what each screen is doing. It says, if there are, 3 screens and 2 people, what do I do? What do I do here? What do I do here? And you can just you get to set up what that is. And that's what makes it valuable to us as broadcasters, is because we can have multiple outputs out of our computer, and we can define what's in that output. You can say this has this and this has that, and kind of, we can define those things for broadcast. And so that makes it very valuable to us. Also, the Zoom room, you're paying for it. If you're in a point-to-point connection with someone, they'll go to 1080p. If you add another person, it'll go back down to 720 or lower. Oh, no, it'll always be 720. So it'll always be 720. If a Zoom room enters anything, it has to get that video at 720. So it just forces everybody gets 720. You get 720. You get 720. So that's how the Zoom room kind of distributes that, is because it needs it. And once it's in the system, Zoom is kind of like, well, I might as well just give it to everybody. So anyway, that's the 10,000 foot overview of how Zoom rooms work. I don't know if Guy wants to add anything to that description.
Yeah, that was a pretty good overview. I mean, a lot of us, like you were saying, just have found that we can pin and do things. So just to show folks with the back end controller. So this is just my iPad. So like Alex was saying, you can change view. So you can go to speaker view, thumbnail view, gallery view. So imagine having 3 HDMI devices hooked up, whether that's a switcher or whether that's
and you literally could take 3 outputs out of a computer, push them into your ATEM Mini, and you have 3 different things that you could just be switching between from that room. So it's a pretty powerful little tool. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, and it makes it really nice and easy when you're on a tablet to flick through a bunch of people at a time. And Beju, who hasn't been on in a while, has mentioned this, that it's really fast to search when you're in here. So if I want to search for Bill, I can just type in BI, and now just the BIs pop up, and it makes it really quick if you've got a ton of people to search through and pin people fast. And if you got 3 displays, it'll pop up like which display do you want to pin them to. I only have one display hooked up to this Zoom room downstairs, but yeah, I can pin Bill, and now Bill will, if he was to check his stats, he'd see that he's getting pulled at full 1920 by 1080 right now. And then there's all kinds of other stuff that you can do. I don't have this hooked up right now, but you can do room controls where you could turn on lights, you could turn on projectors, open up curtains. There's a bunch of stuff that we haven't even dived into, but I can imagine setting up 3-point lighting in a conference room where I'm just like, okay, boom, let's turn on the big soft light. Oh, we want some color gels back there. But doing that all remotely. So there's even more powerful capabilities that we haven't even delved into yet. But for the most part, think of it as a conference room with this is the controller and then a big display, like I was just showing in the YouTube video.
Paul,
Chris.
and then back to Hosmuc.
Thank you, Alex. I just wanted to mention that I'm on a 30-day trial of Zoom Room, so you can get it for free right now. And I'm not sure what the pricing is after that. Somebody else might address that issue. Thanks, Alex.
Now go ahead, Hosmuc.
Yeah, I was going to go for the trial, but it had to answer too many questions. I thought it was quicker just to buy a room. Do you use Zoom rooms to initiate a meeting or a webinar, and how do you do that? I mean, how does Zoom room fit into a scheduled meeting like this one or a webinar?
Go ahead, Guy. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so in our typical conference room, it's actually beautiful. It's a nice touch screen display. It's the same one on the portal. It just has a button that says Meet Now, and we just hit Meet Now, and it starts up a meeting, and there's a meeting ID. And since we have a lot of our corporate folks right there, we can just hit Invite, and they'll get a message saying they've been invited, or they just know that it's that time for that meeting. You know, it's a 3 o'clock meeting, and they just start popping in. You could even set up Zoom rooms to automatically start the meeting. So at 10 minutes before, it'll automatically start up the meeting. So as people are walking into a physical conference room, the meeting's already going, and people can, say hi, say goodbye. At the end, it can actually end the meeting automatically if you'd like. So there's a lot of powerful features. And one of the strangest things that we have is we have a conference phone that has a bunch of microphones that spider off of it. And that's also the controller to begin the meeting, start the meeting, screen share. And then you can whiteboard, and what was the other thing that you could do? Oh, PTZ control. So I could control the camera in the room from the phone controller on the desk. And the sound's amazing. And it's over USB over Ethernet, which is the strangest thing I've ever seen. But it does, like, you configure it USB and then you disconnect it and it rides over IP. So it's kind of crazy to set these things up. So you could work with them at a high level. I mean, those phones that I was talking about are $800 a whack. The PTZ camera is $2,000. So you can get into this stuff deep, but you load up 3 displays. Like, look at this example. They got 4 displays and a big Polycom camera across the top. It looks like a sound bar with a camera and a microphone array. So you can get into stuff deep if you want to use it in the traditional sense. But again, we're using it more for production because we've discovered cool stuff with it.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
and I
guy.
will
All I could see was beer garage.
and I will say that after being in Zoom for all this time, and I've been in on the other end of those conference rooms for a decade, oftentimes for 3 to 6 hours a day. Everybody at home in Zoom, when they get a good mic and a good camera, is way better than every conference room ever made. Like, it's just, the conference rooms are just a disaster. They're good. They make everybody feel good when they're in them. People in them get a great experience, but everybody on the far end of a conference room gets a horrible experience. The audio is always echoing. Now, guys may be different because he's paying attention to audio and things like that. But the most, if you put sonics or do something with the walls, you can actually have something that probably would be okay. But I feel like you get to see much more of people when you look at a single camera. That said, Zoom rooms are a great broadcast tool. Jeffrey, and then back to Hosmuk, and then Dan.
So I got a Zoom room about a month ago, and I've actually run into a problem with the resolution. I'm not, because even on the page, on the front page, it says the one-on-one is 1080, and I've not been getting 1080 or even 720 on my room. I've been getting 360, and I've put in a request on that, and I'm still waiting for an answer from tech support, which is kind of frustrating, especially since they've been very good at answering questions. So I'm not exactly sure why, but it's very important to make sure that you are getting 720 at least.
My guess is you have something about your connection. You probably have a fast connection, but there's something about that interface that it doesn't like, because I've never seen a Zoom room do 360 ever.
And I can do 720 on the computer. I've done the tests with systems that can do at least 720, and it does go up to 720. I just don't understand why my room's not.
Go ahead, Guy, real quick, and then Hosmuk, and then Dan, and then Chris.
It's just that it's reliant on what the other side is pulling you at. So take 3 people in a meeting, make sure that you're not just in gallery view, because if you're in gallery view, you're only going to get 360. You got to take somebody full screen. From the opposite side has to pull you at a larger resolution to fill up their screen. So just make the window bigger. And I've never seen it, like Alex, I've never seen one under 720. So it always has worked for us, and I've done hundreds of these.
Yeah, Hosmuk, and then Dan, and then Chris.
I normally schedule the cooking class or the language class through a regular meeting and send out the invite. But 2 reasons why I looked at the Zoom room. One was for the resolution, so that I can get 720. The second one was, I think it was mentioned that you can arrange the grid view and the spotlight view and get better control of that through a Zoom room. So what should my workflow be? Do I schedule a meeting as I do normally as I've been done, and just get the Zoom room to be an attendee in that meeting to get me the resolution? And is that the only benefit I have for doing that?
Well, I guess I would say that the benefit to the Zoom room is A, the resolution, and B, the control over what's going out of that Zoom room, so that you can actually poke different things into those. You have multiple outputs that you can control, and they're always going to be the same. Like the thing that we use the Zoom rooms for, which I just think is We just kind of ran into it because a client asked for it. And then we were just like, oh, this just changes everything, which is that the client wants to do their own presentation. They don't want you to do it. And you don't want to do it because they have a bunch of clicks that they want to do. Being able to have a Zoom room say out of monitor 1 is their presentation and out of monitor 2 is them. And both of them are at full resolution. Being able to push that into your switcher is ninja. like it is, having both of those that I don't have to think about. It's just, they just connect. They don't have to have anything special on their end. I've spent years fiddling with that problem of being able to do that. So that's a big advantage for you for the cooking. I would say it's resolution and being able to possibly put a second monitor in. So you could have the person talking to you as full screen on one side of the camera and the gallery on the other. And that would be kind of a nice way of, and being able to, you could do that theoretically with a regular Hangout, but you don't have as much control, not Hangout, sorry, Zoom. I think of Zooms as just big Hangouts. You have more control over how that works, and it's more stable that way. It doesn't keep on changing things as other people have talked about.
So through Zoom Room, can you better control what the attendees see in terms
Not that I
of
know
what
of.
spotlight?
In fact, I feel like you
Okay.
have less control. Like like it's you turn it on and it's the room. If I really want to do the kind of things that I'm doing in this meeting, I wouldn't use a room because I can't. It's not really clickable in the same way. Go ahead, Dan, and then Chris.
Yeah, and what I really like about it that I want to put in all our conference rooms is that the room is then the host. The room has its own personal meeting ID and doesn't take up mine or but all of our conference rooms are so locked into using the wireless air media. They bring their laptop in, they throw it up there. So it would be a big conversion, but maybe there's a way to get the air media as one of those inputs. I'm steering it into another question.
Yeah, it does work. You just walk in and you can wirelessly, it's almost like an AirPlay device. So it works the same.
Yep. Chris?
What I was going to say, a couple things. One, Guy, when you showed that display with that photo with 4 displays up, if you look closely on the table in the front of the room, it looks like there's 2 controllers. I think that's two display rooms side by side. But Hasmukh, to your original question, one of the things that I deal with all the time in our organization is there are multiple people that can schedule a meeting. So the Zoom room never schedules the meeting. It just joins and then takes the ISOs to do the record. I can literally just sort of slip into the back door and pick the people that I want to record, hit my button and record them. So it doesn't need to host. It can just participate.
Great. Next question.
Moving on, we have a question from Tony Adamopoulos in Missouri. After exhausting the capabilities of iMovie, what's the next best step in video editing software on a Mac and why?
I think the most logical step is Final Cut. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Final Cut and why. I would say closer integration to motion and multicam and the timeline index. And I will gladly spend an hour talking about just the timeline index if you ever want.
Amen, brother.
Well, again, if you're doing, especially obviously it was built so that if you know iMovie, it's not a huge jump to jump into Final Cut. So the connection between the two, the interface is much similar. So your conversion will be relatively easy. Final Cut is just way faster. And I will say for me, still way more pleasurable to edit in than other apps. It's just fun to think about things and cut things with it. Now, I will say that I spend now, at the moment, I'm spending probably 60 to 70% of my time in Resolve, but that's because Final Cut's tools to manage HDR and surround are not as good as Resolve's. And so I'm building technical events, a lot of them, and doing color correction and building LUTs and doing a lot of other things that I need Resolve for. So I think that those are the 2 apps. I think that if you want to get a job in the industries, quote unquote, then you should look at Premiere and Avid. If you want to actually get things done, then you should use Final Cut and Resolve. And so those are the, Premiere and Avid are I want to get a job in the industry. I want to be a freelancer. Legacy agencies will be using it, so you'll need to get into that. But I don't know a single social media person that uses anything other than Final Cut. Except for the ones that think they're going to work in Hollywood, they work in Premiere. Oh, I got, because someday I'll get a job in this. But all I see is Final Cut. I'm seeing Resolve start to pick up speed, and now that I'm in Resolve, I see a lot of people with Resolve because I run into them. But I think, and the other thing is $300 for both of these. $300 once, forever. It just that pays off after a while if it's a personal thing. So just keep that in mind. Go ahead, Brian.
So I live in a Premiere world because I get it for free through my job.
Mm-hmm.
Does either Final Cut or Resolve with their library of management stuff give you sort of a mini MAM where you could have say assets like lower thirds and stuff that you could use across multiple projects and drag them in easily? I'm looking at Resolve and I kind of get the sense it can do that, but I'm not sure. And Final Cut, I've never really touched.
Yeah, good, Chris.
Yeah, one of the clients that we have is a uber high-end realtor, and we make videos for 10, 20, $30 million homes routinely. Excuse me. We have shared libraries that we're currently putting on Dropbox, where we can just pull, graphics in all the time, music bits, all kinds of stuff. And one of the nice things about Final Cut is you can open multiple, they call them libraries, but Premiere would call it a project. You can have a whole bunch of libraries open, and you can just drag stuff in between. And when you do, Final Cut will go, hey, you're pulling this from another library. You mind if I media manage it into this library? And you go, yes, please. So yeah, it's super, super simple.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, you mentioned that the timeline index is kind of a revelation, and it is. It tracks everything you put on your storyline and literally gives you kind of a column view of that, plus lets you do things like assign roles. And roles is another one of those things, like the timeline index, that people who don't use this software don't understand, but it has this unbelievable capability to allow you to export stems and versions of the audio tracks of your software in ways that's hugely powerful. But a lot of editors will never even open it up and play with it very much. They'll just live inside the program and do lots of work. But 10 is kind of like that. Or I guess they've dropped the 10 now. It's just Final Cut Pro is like that. It has these kind of subsections that are highly powerful and can do specific jobs brilliantly, but they're not in front of your face, bothering you in the interface all the time.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, just a quick newbie question. Quick newbie question here. DaVinci Resolve 17 Beta or DaVinci Resolve Studio 17 Beta? Which do you start out with?
Well, you need the code for Studio. So if you got a code, then Studio. So otherwise, you can get the beta. The beta is free. The other thing about Resolve is that you have a free version that you can learn to use, and it will do almost everything you need. So it's actually a better solution that way, where you can download it for free. For most people, you probably be in Resolve for a year before you jumped into Studio. So it you can do it's fully functional. They just pulled out a handful of things that I need, of course. But the reality is that you every time you buy one of these cameras, any camera you buy from Blackmagic, it comes for free. So if you don't buy one, if you're going to get the camera, don't buy Resolve, because it comes for free with every camera that you buy from Blackmagic. So go ahead, Brian.
Which I've got a camera coming, so that's part of my question about this. So what Chris described, where you could have a library, is that what it's called in Final Cut, and you can talk to each other. Can you do the same thing in Resolve?
You can absolutely have libraries. I haven't had to do it, so I'd have to figure out exactly how you would set that up. But there's projects, and those projects are looking back at folders. And I think what you would do is you'd add those folders to it, and you'd add that folder to multiple projects. You just keep on, I'm going to add that folder to the project, and then you'd have access to it all. So you just,
and that lives in the database that you set up with each Resolve project?
Yeah, so it's not moving the files. They're all just referring back to it. The Resolve's probably actually a little better at it, as far as that goes, and about equal, actually. You just Resolve, but Resolve, you just send pointers to it. And you send pointers to it, and each one you just import that. This is my client doc into every project as you open it. I bet you there's a way to do it automatically too. It just keeps on opening those, but I haven't tried that. With Resolve, you can go, And I could probably write a shell script for that. Like there's actually Resolve has scripting, so you can just say I want to do all these things, and Resolve will just do them for you. We're moving a little slow through these questions, so I'm going to keep moving because we're going to run out of time. Next question.
Moving on to Jonas Natal of Reutlingen. Did someone use an InterNuc for the Zoom room? That's IntelNuc for the Zoom room. There is a pretty cheap one on the recommended list. I'm not sure I know what an IntelNuc is.
A NUC is it's like a tiny Mac Mini,
Oh.
So, and they're actually pretty powerful. I've seen ones where we had somebody who ran like a 64 displays, and they had 64 NUCs in the back, and they would all grab things from the web and pull things in and everything else. But it's like a little box. They come, they're like little boxes, and they're not quite as powerful as the new Mac Minis, but they're probably as powerful as the old ones. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, the NUC is a nice box to have. I actually have one sitting on my desktop. It's what's called the Skull Canyon version, which is the i7 version of the NUC. You also have the square boxes, which are usually the i5 versions. Both of them will run rooms, but they've been around for a long time. So if you've got something from like 2011, 2012, it might be a little bit tougher because of the integrated graphics. You can't put a graphics card in there, but if you get a Skull Canyon, you should be able to run a room without a problem. I'm actually running my VR headset through this system.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, just to show how lightweight it is, I'm running it on a 2013 MacBook Pro, a Zoom room with an external display. So it's actually driving 2 monitors and it works. So you don't need a super, super powerful machine unless you want to go to that third display. That's when it starts getting to where you need some graphics, dedicated graphic support. So the IntelNuc does work well though.
Next question.
Cool to learn something new. Johnny Estias in Manila says, yesterday Andy Carluccio mentioned ZoomOSC. I took a look at it yesterday and it's great. I was able to control Zoom from my Stream Deck. Has anyone else tried it? What did you think of it?
So 2 things. Three things. One is, Johnny, the great little adding the little how to pronounce your name into the question. That really makes Bill's job. I saw that earlier. I was like, well done. So yeah. So anyway, that was good. And Andy's going to be back. Just as a note, just before we get into the questions, Andy's going to be back. He is not just mentioned it; he's wrote it. So he's the creator of ZoomOSC, and so he's going to. He randomly he came into our early 5 a.m. thing, and Grant was showing off his product, and so it was kind of a funny interaction. But anyway, after watching him and Grant talk about it, and then also us talking about it a little bit more, we're going to do a whole hour on ZoomOSC this coming Friday. So a week from yesterday. So I think it's a really, really powerful app, and I think that we should all get good at it. So we're going to work together at getting good at it. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Just real quick, if you check the Discord in the next couple of days, Andy said he was going to post a video about using it with his Stream Deck. So
Great.
Hold on for that.
And yeah, and the advantage is I have a feeling that Andy's going to become part of our little family, at least in Discord and probably on ones where we talk about it. So I think that this will probably be a great place to learn how to use ZoomOSC. All right, next question.
Moving on, Mike Wren of Albany, New York says, what audio noise floor do you like to see in the studio and out in the field? 0. Also, what's the general thought on noise gating? More trouble than it's worth?
Mickey, do you want to talk to that at all?
Oh, okay. Out in the field, of course. Hey, it's that time again. It depends. It depends what you're recording. For say, I guess most of the time here we're talking about speech, I think, and most of the content that people here work on. Yeah, as Bill mentioned, as 0 or as much as possible, essentially as much as possible. You'll want to have a as high a signal to noise ratio that you can get. So say if you're out in the doing exteriors, you'll probably want like the loudest would probably be like a 30 dB difference between your noise and your signal. Of course, because that varies depending on how loud you record. That would be the loudest I would accept. If you're in a studio, then I would expect somewhere in the range of 50 to 60 dB of difference there.
Yeah, and I'm right in the same line. I if I'm looking at it, if I just turn a mic on and no one's talking, I really want to see that mic at a -40, you know, like at minimum. And that's about the same what Mickey's talking about, because you're talking at -10, let's say. So that -30, that 30 dBs is pretty much the same, I think. But it's just that if you just turn the mic on, that's a minimum. Like that's like outside or whatever. I want to see it at negative. I don't want to see anything peaking over -40 if I can avoid it. And then same thing with Mickey. I don't want to see it peaking over -60 if I'm in a studio. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Bill.
And yeah, just to finish off his question, like thoughts on noise gating depends why you're gating. If it's for speech, most of the time gates are too hard on it. So I would probably, if you have to use a gate, I would not go below like 12 dB of reduction on it. I won't go crazy with the getting rid of it. But say if you're trying to get rid hi-hat bleed on a snare, then you can be a bit more liberal with using a noise gate. So again, it depends.
Yep. As always. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and I just want to define, I mean, noise is a funny thing because it has a moving definition. Some things, hisses, hums, and things like that are always noise. But sometimes when you're recording something outside, the ambience is part of the actual signal. So in one thing, if I'm trying to do a voiceover somewhere and I'm trying to find a quiet place, everything, birds and that is noise and I want to get it out of there. But if in a restaurant thing, some dishes and some people walking by is part of the scene. So that would normally be noise. It's now part of my signal. So you have to know what you're trying to record and why.
Next question.
Moving on to Mike Wren of Albany, New York. And Mike asks, obligatory, hey, Alex and panel, how are the M1 adventures going question?
So far, I haven't seen anything that, I haven't seen any issue that I attribute to the M1 other than it's really fast. So there are some odd issues with Zoom that I thought were a M1 issue. Then I thought it was a Big Sur issue, but it appears that I'm having the same problems in Intel and in Big Sur. And even in other operating systems. And that is the security issue where the camera, you jump into a new Zoom room or a new Zoom meeting and the camera now is gray, dark gray. And a couple of us have seen this problem, but we think it's Zoom. Other than that, I have been super happy with the Mac Mini that I'm testing. We went and bought a bunch more, and I'm going to buy more probably in December to run my studio. I think that they're pretty amazing. Go ahead, Victor.
Have you had any issues with sound devices, loopback, audio hijack, anything like that you want to discuss?
I admit I haven't used loopback or audio hijack in it. I have my use case has been pretty limited to, I opened up Resolve to see what it would do. I threw up Final Cut and it worked great. I also have been primarily these first round that I bought were for Zoom. So my thing was, does it work in Zoom? So it works great. So that's that was the, like, does it perform well and act well? Am I getting good frame rates? That kind of thing. And so that first round of testing was there. I haven't gone through a kind of exhaustive round of software. Anyone else that is using M1?
I mentioned that only because I know specifically for Audio Hijack and their products, you need to go to their page and follow some specific instructions until they make an M1 version. So because you will run into issues.
I do think that I do attribute a bunch of things that I've had issues with related to Big Sur. So I think that Big Sur is a big change. It seems to be affecting my Intel Macs as well as my M1 Mac. So I would hesitate. That would be my only hesitation. If I'm using anything special, it's really Big Sur that I'm more concerned about. I feel like they made a lot of changes and they're not all done yet. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I've got the MacBook Pro. Got the same specs as I had on the 2018 Air, and that fan used to run all the time. This fan hasn't kicked on once yet, and I'm just mainly experimenting with Zoom and the app, the add-on, the background, and it hasn't. It seems to handle everything really well.
Right. Next question.
Moving on to Stan Chan again from Roosevelt. Anyone know if ZoomOSC works with the Zoom rooms?
Go ahead, Benjamin.
Have not tried it, but I do know that it requires a Windows or Mac, and as far as I know, Zoom Rooms does not. It depends what kind of controller you're running it on. So just be careful there.
Jeffrey?
I'm testing that out today with my room along with the resolutions. So ask that question tomorrow.
Perfect. Next question.
Stan has a third one. Is there a virtual white elephant that might work well?
I don't know what that means. I think maybe it was, he might have asked both of them at the same, two questions at the same time. They got separated by voting.
Yeah. So Stan, if
I
you
can't
want to,
what answer. The funny thing is, there were 6 people that voted for that question. Like, what? They moved that question up. I'm just like, what are you just
white
messing with
elephants
us
used to
now?
be a giga and a yard sale. So I wonder if they're looking for stuff to buy for Christmas. I don't know. This is confusing.
All
I've
right.
had a few nights where I've seen pink
Although
elephants.
now based on the question from Stan, I kind of do want to send all of you a virtual white elephant. So I'm gonna we'll see if I can work on it. Won't be very expensive. I just have to download the model. I'll send it to you. All right. It'll be Merry Christmas. Here's your white elephant. All right. Next question.
Mickey from the panel in the Philippines says, hey, breakout room gurus, is it possible to not allow unmuting in the main session, but allow it in the breakout rooms?
I don't think so.
Something
go ahead,
to
Benjamin.
test in the post show.
Yeah.
A great
maybe.
thing to test in post show.
Yeah.
When I've accidentally done it in the past, you can, if you set under the security badge to not allow participants to unmute, they generally can unmute in breakout rooms, but I would consider that not a hard and fast rule and something that requires a little bit further testing.
Yeah. Jeffrey.
From last question, Stan went in the chat. He goes virtual gift exchange game.
Oh, virtual. Sorry, say that again. He said it's a virtual gift exchange.
I think he just wants a virtual gift exchange from office hours is what's going on.
I barely understand gift exchanges.
So we all just put our names in a hat and then draw each other's name and then run a contest. So the one person can steal the other one's gift and stuff like that.
It's something that humans do, Alex. You may not be familiar with it.
I don't know what that is.
And a virtual version of that.
My family kind of dropped. We had kind of like we all pick it, but then they just drop me out of it because I'm really. I send people things when I find something that they like. I buy it and I send it to them, but I don't do it around certain days. So it's like my wife has trained me to get better at that, and so around birthdays and Christmas with the kids, I now do it because I'll buy the kids things. Like, oh, this is a really cool book. I just buy it to them, give it to them. I don't save it because I'm like, I don't know if they'll like it back by the time they get to Christmas. And so it's like, so I just buy things for people, and send it to them. But the arbitrary date, especially Christmas, is an arbitrary date because it wouldn't have ever happened at that time in that place. Anyway, so we kind of make up these weird dates and then sell everyone on the idea that we should buy more things. Anyway, go ahead, Sky.
Hallmark has to sell cards. So they
best thing about Hallmark
focus,
cards. Best thing about Hallmark cards is the mechanical ones. The ones that if I'll post a link somewhere of a Hallmark engineer tearing apart the cards and showing you how to hack the cards. It's kind of
that you talk into and they repeat back. Yeah.
No. She takes them apart. She's like super. Yeah. She takes the cards apart.
Oh yeah.
Pulls the little piece of electronics out of it and then shows you how to do something completely different with it. I was very fascinated that Hallmark let her do it. Let her do that video. There's other videos that she's done that we haven't published. Go ahead. I mean, of like hacking cards, really, really hacking them, like taking a Hallmark card and turning it into a Halloween display. Go ahead, Sky.
Oh, I do that. I just light it on fire. So the Kansas City is where Hallmark, and they have a great internal video production that I worked with. Yeah. And anyway, there's a long story. They're great people. What I was going to say with regards to white elephant concept is my wife and I have decided we're trying to support various things. And so we are giving in your name. And then I don't know if that could be a white elephant opportunity as well. And I talked with Ryan the other day, and Ryan is a wonderful guy, Alex, that you support. So I see why you would give to that cause or reason other than on a specific day of the year. That's my point.
Next question.
Moving on to Stan Chan in Roseville. Recommendations for bulk 12G SDI cable and connector brand.
It depends on the, as Mickey would say, it depends. It depends. So it's all about length. of how long you want to run. So there's some people that will only use like Belden is kind of the normal, the Belden 12G, and they've got like 12 different versions of it. But the Belden 12G is kind of what a lot of people will go to. It's really thick. It will do the job. The downside of it is that it's really thick and it really is heavy. And if you fill a whole rack with it, it becomes, the rack is hard to work with. And it's also heavy. It adds a lot of weight. So we use, oh, now I'm gonna have to go find it. We use these thinner cables, and I'll try to find the brand of it. But this is a much smaller gauge. This will still support 12G at short, under 25 feet and really under 50 feet. This will support 12G easily. Over 50 feet, you can't use it for 12G, but you can use it under that, and definitely under 25 feet, and definitely if you're building a rack. And then we use these Neutrik rear twist connectors, which as people have heard, I'm kind of fanatical about, because you don't need a trumpeter to grab onto them and turn them. Even on a 40 by 40 router, you can just put your little fingers in there and pull them out. It really makes life more livable. So anyway, those are my two things. Anybody else? I saw somebody else's hand up, but then I lost it. Oh, go ahead, Mickey.
All right. Yeah, I'm just taking a look here of exactly what model we ordered, because we just like click buy again. We get the Belden 4794R, and that's rated for 98 meters, 320 feet, for 12G SDI usage.
It's thick, isn't it?
It is.
And not very bendy.
It is heavy. Yes, it is heavy.
So for long runs, to Mickey's point, for long runs, I would absolutely use that. And we, that's the right thing for, again, if you're building, and this is still Belden, by the way. I looked at it here. This is the Belden. No, I can't. Quite.
1855 looks like.
It is I can't read it without my other glasses. Anyways, so anyway, we'll get it there. But it is it really is kind of, when you're building small kits and you're doing small runs, we think a lot about weight. And weight and how easy it is going to be to work with it and everything else. And we test them all for 12G, and we found that this stuff works just fine. Like this cable is 10 feet or whatever. I have full confidence that it'll go 12. Well, this camera is 12G, and I use it on it. So anyway, so just think about weight. And again, yeah, well, I still owe everybody an hour on how to build these cables, because it's really fun. Mickey.
Yeah, for something a bit more easy to work with, but shorter runs, there's the Canary L5.5C. I don't recall off the top of my head what the rated maximum length at 12G is.
And we're going to go into speed round, because we're running out of time. Next question.
Steve Cotton of San Francisco Bay Area says, has anyone converted an older mole-type light to LED bulbs? Cost and output. Was it Laura Seal who had a bunch of those old Fresnel fixtures and had rewired them for something different? Somebody that we know.
It was Angela, I think.
Oh, was it Angela? Yeah.
Yeah.
They were awesome.
Yeah, you're getting a little you're distorted, Bill. I'm not sure exactly why.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like a weird distortion. It's not too loud. It's just distorted. Anyway, next question.
Okay, moving on. Dan Huber, you discussed yesterday in Zoom you can record individual participant audio locally. Does that also record a combined audio file?
Chris? Yes, it does. There's a master file, and then there's ISOs. I caught Chris taking a drink. All right, next question.
Moving on to Chris Fenwick of Sacramento, who says, can we just talk about DisplayLink for a bit? What is it? Who's behind it? Any downfalls to using it? My Zoom ISO record system seems like it needs it.
So DisplayLink, I was turned on to it by Grant, and the OWC Y adapter cable thing that I've been talking about for the last few days didn't work. I did get a Mac Mini yesterday, an M1 Mac Mini, and it didn't work as well as it did on my laptop. So I could only get one output through that thing. Grant says, oh, you get this adapter. It falls under the umbrella of DisplayLink, and DisplayLink appears to be this whole protocol that somehow gets into the computer and allows, I'm going to be able to get a 1920, I ordered one made by Pluggable. I'm going to be able to get a 1920 by 1080 out of a USB 3 port through this Pluggable USB 3 to HDMI thing. Grant says totally works.
Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick, and then we're gonna move on.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's too deep for
no.
a speed round. Sorry.
First of all, I love the fact that I can read your question and hear your voice by reading the question. Secondly, DisplayLink is technology from 2003 that they set it up with Kensington, USB 2.0. So this is old technology. It'll work, but you know we're talking pre-super graphics cards here, so you can give it a try. It works.
Next question.
Ooh, I can do this one. What's the etymology of lavaliere? What defines one?
Go ahead, Bill. Do it quickly.
Go
for it.
Louis XIV had a mistress named Madame Lavaliere, made her a big piece of jewelry that hung down in front of her. That is the form, and we've moved that into the modern era. That's what we call a lavaliere. That's where it came from.
We should just stop using that then. Now that we know what it is. All right, next question.
Stan Chan of Roseville says, ideas around practical use of the ultrasonic proximity detection technology in a Zoom room. One current application is auto screen sharing in a Zoom room without logging into the client.
I've never even seen that. So it makes me very much want to learn more about it. Go ahead, Guy, real quick.
One of the things it can do is start meetings based on who walks into the room. And I think it's an ultra high frequency that we can't hear, but the system then knows that you're there, and it can start the meeting and do other things. But cool stuff. I guess too short for this.
Let's figure that out. That sounds awesome. I have a bunch of ideas about that. Anyway, next question.
Moving on, TJ Asher of Minneapolis says, what do folks think about the day and date release of movies from Warner Brothers throughout 2021? How do you think this will impact smaller budget independent films? So they're going virtual and to the theaters same day, I guess.
I think it's the end of theaters. I mean, end of bad theaters. So I think that Dolby Cinema, IMAX, ArcLight, those are probably all theaters that'll rise up, and still be something that we want to go see. Big infrastructure theaters, maybe the ones with good seats, maybe. But for the most part, I don't think once they go to day and date, I don't think they're going to go back. I think this is a nod to the AMC, and these other ones may not survive, and they can't keep waiting for them. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is this paradigm shift where I think going to the movies and the theaters is going to become more of an event. You're going to pay more for it, and it's going to be much larger screen, much better sound, the Uber stuff that you can't get into your home. And it's going to be sad. I think it's going to be sad for the independent cinemas. I think
independent cinema, here's the thing is that I think it's cinema. People can watch it at home now. If you look at independent cinema, I don't have to, this is people who went to film school and think that going to the theater is the only way to watch a movie is like, oh my gosh, people can't watch my movie in the theater. We're all watching them at home. The thing is that I don't need to, and especially now, this is basically taking all that stigma away because we're going to see the biggest films ever, biggest films made last year are going to be on TV. It's going to change the way people think about what goes on TVs. But a lot of us have 70-inch, vision empowered TVs with a surround, 5.1 or 5.14 or 7.14 or 7.12 or whatever it is. That's better than most theaters. That's going to be a better, if you think about how far away you are from the screen and how big it is and everything else, that's better than your experience at most theaters. And you can make your own popcorn and you can have a cocktail and it costs you 1/4 the money. So I think that it doesn't, I've been slowly disengaging from theaters for years because my system got better. Like 3 years ago, I moved into a house with a 7.1 system, and a big screen, and I just stopped going to the movies, and that's all it takes for someone to stop going to the movies is a 7.1 or 5.1 surround and a good screen, and you just stop wanting to go because it's good enough for most of what you're doing. Paul and then Dan, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Alex. I think IMAX is going to survive because it's hard to get that.
I agree.
And also drive-in theaters and also maybe dinner theaters. We have this thing in Austin called the Alamo Draft House, and you get a nice pizza or meal and drink and all that. Theaters that have a lot of value add, beyond just the movie.
I went to Alamo once. Sorry, like it just the like I am such a like I'm not even sure I like people eating popcorn in the theater, let alone eating like the clinking. It was the clinking the clinking makes me crazy when I'm watching a movie. So anyway, but I do think that IMAX could survive, except for the fact that all IMAX theaters seem to be about 2 frames off on the audio. I see it everywhere, and it just drives me absolutely batty. So I won't go anymore. Anyway, Dan.
Maybe the movie studios will get more involved then in what type of equipment is in your house. Maybe they'll get some, in relationship with the manufacturers of those. They do?
It's called Dolby.
Well,
that's the
true.
interaction. Yeah. That's the pipeline. Chris, and then Sky, really quickly, and we'll move on.
Did the Bond film get purchased? Because that's a huge implication if that actually goes through. Have you followed that story at all?
I haven't watched
it. Has not been purchased yet. Has not.
Okay, so the latest Bond movie, COVID, not in the theater, some of the streaming people are bidding to take it. And the last number I heard was like $550 million for it. And that's more than Bond movies have been making lately. So if a streaming agency buys it and streams it on Netflix, Hulu, whatever, that kills theaters.
This is the Kaiser Soze principle. I call it the Kaiser Soze principle because I love Usual Suspects, and so but I've watched it like 50 times, and so but the Kaiser Soze principle is that there's those jobs that always paid more than they like they always talk about that they always made more than they were worth. That's because what he was doing, what Kaiser Soze was doing, of course, was he was there's multiple interacting events that are all going on that he makes money on, but not any one of them. And in the same sense of that is that these big streaming companies are making money in a different way than selling theater tickets, and as a result, they can play a game that traditional Hollywood can't play. Like they just have to play along. They're done. Like they're not. The theater experience is going to be different. Where Amazon's already starting to talk about their own theaters. I wouldn't be surprised if Apple had their own theaters at some point. Because they're taking Netflix they're talking about getting rid of the antitrust. I think they already have gotten rid of the antitrust situation. So the streaming companies can buy theaters now, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we see in major markets branded theaters from Apple, Netflix, Amazon, so on and so forth, that are their theaters playing their stuff the way they want people to see it. So it'll be like, Dolby Cinema or IMAX level of their screen, so that there is a place to see the events, and it makes them eligible for the Oscars. Go ahead, Sky, real quick.
End user experience and content. So Alex, you talk about seeing this at home for free. Well, it's not free because you're paying subscription, you're paying thousands of dollars worth of setting up your system. So you're just offsetting that $15 a segment. I go to a vacation spot because I want somebody else to make the bed and clean up the toilet. So it's just augmenting the experience.
Well, but the difference is though, is the more you watch, the less it costs to do it.
Exactly.
So we watch a couple movies a week, and that would cost me, if I went to the theater, that would cost me with a family of 4 buying popcorn, that would cost me $80 to $100
at least.
And so the thing is that so I look at the math
of,
yeah, and my popcorn is better for you and tastes better. So it's all about the Lindy.
If you want to play baseball,
yeah.
If you want to play baseball, you could do it in your backyard, or you could go to a professional event space. So it's going to be interesting what event space looks like in the future.
If we have, if 3 years from now we have more than 3,000 screens, I'll be pretty surprised. I think it's 15,000 now. If there's more than 3,000 left, I'd be surprised. Next question.
Ricardo Hicks of Raleigh, North Carolina says, when using Zoom instances, are other producers using several laptops to pin presenters in order to arrange a multi-view over a background layer? When do you decide to simply use the gallery view and stop cameras of the non-panel participants? That's the question.
Budget. For me, it's just budget. Like if I have the budget, I'll never use the gallery view. so I'll never do because the multi-pinning doesn't show up on the stream correctly, doesn't show up for people on the web, doesn't show, there's a bunch of things about it. So the only time I use a gallery view is that the client doesn't have the budget for me to ISO everything out and put it into a switcher. I don't know if anybody else has any other. Okay, next question.
Moving on to Greg Gibson of Washington, D.C. Looks like Guy is sporting A new hair light looks great. Can you talk about what he's using and how controllable it might be? I guess you guys with hair have to worry about things like hair lights. Ooh.
If you don't have hair, then you probably don't want to put a hair light up. But if you have one up high, you're going to get this kind of rim look. But if you don't have hair, you can just lower the light and kick it over the shoulders. This is just a Litra light that kind of makes me get this 3D look by popping me out. You can kind of see it come together now. And then if I go to the Litra app, you can see what happens if I make it too bright. Let's see, blow it up. So this is too much. That's the halo effect. And then you also want to pay attention to color. So this is like a white color. Bring it back down to more of an orange color. So it works well with depending on the hair color. Like I have dark hair, obviously, and so the orange tends to give me that 3D look. Whereas somebody with blonde hair, you might not want to make them too orange because then it just looks funny. But there you go. Hope that helps.
Next question.
Awesome. It comes from our friend Serena Catania in San Diego. Where can I get a rack for a good price? Used equipment. That's an interesting subject.
If we're talking about, equipment racks, it just depends on the size. So smaller racks, for smaller racks and more portable ones, we've kind of centralized around SKB. I feel like the construction quality is a little bit better than Gator. And so those for smaller racks, and they have these great little roto racks, and they have all kinds of little ones that are just the shell of a rack that you can put in and ship. And so we've bought hundreds of SKB racks. When they get larger, I think it's called road cases or whatever, we have them built for us. Usually what's great, and I'll try to find the thing and put it up there. We define exactly how we want the rack to look and where there's shelves and pull outs and everything else. And we send them off to these folks in LA, and I think it's Ahmad puts them together for it, calls us panicked that we asked for that for 3 days. And then they send them to us completely built. And so those aren't the cheapest racks, but they're great. But on smaller racks, and I would say sub 10 or 12U, I almost always get SKBs. Go ahead, Jeffrey, Bill, and then Stephen, real quick. We weren't going to go over, but we went over. Anyway, go ahead.
A lot of my musician friends are organizing their stuff, and they're actually selling their gear. So go and take a look and see if they've got any sales, because they're selling their old racks. They've changed up all their compressors and to newer electronics.
The one thing I'll say is that if you do that, know that you're probably going to have to change all the screw mounts. So you have to look at the one thing about if the rack comes with squares, if you see square holes, that means you're going to put them all in yourself, your screw mounts in yourself, and it's going to take a long time. If you're buying, I won't buy used racks because it means I know that I have to replace those rails, and I just don't want to deal with it. So the rails, the problem is that when people aren't careful with the screws, the 1032s or the 1224s that they use, they'll strip that little screw piece and you can't screw into it anymore, or you have to retap it, and it's all a big mess. So you have to be very careful about that. The other thing is that I almost never use a screw twice. They're not very expensive. You can buy them in bulk. And when I stop using them, I put them in a hole that we use with old racks or whatever. But when I use my racks, I have new screws and I put them into those holes because it's really expensive and painful for me to change out that thing. And then I also, we can get into a whole lot of things about mounting racks, but I'm very, very specific about it because it's really expensive and painful to solve if you don't do that. Go ahead, Bill, and then Stephen. If you don't change your racks very often, you won't care. If you change your racks often, you really care about the threading. Bill, and then Stephen.
Yeah, because rack screws have fine threads, and if you don't have a power screwdriver, they're a pain in the ass to do by hand and stuff like that. So the answer that I would
never
say,
build a rack without a power screwdriver.
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Right. Yeah, anyway.
There are also data racks and music racks and things like rack drawers or rack slide outs that can really help you get to the back of your equipment if you have to repatch things. So pay attention to the kind of rack that you need and buy what you actually need.
We need an hour on racks.
Yeah, we really do.
Someone put that into the second hour suggestion, please, on Discord, because there's a lot of us that could talk about racks all day. Anyway, Stephen.
So right now, skeleton racks in the Bay Area, $1 a U.
There you go. Next question.
And it appears this is the last one non-EDU. A. Mitchells in Washington says, maybe Andy should get his own special Saturday hour for a while to teach what he wants about ZoomOSC if he has the time. Same with a few other people we all know who make cool things and have an interest here. So that's his suggestion.
we'll do Friday and see how it goes, and then we'll find out if Andy wants to play. I'm 100% behind that. So 100% behind doing that. I just I think that it's going to take more time to, and Saturdays are coming back soon. I just have to. I think it's probably going to be the first of the year before we really get deep into Saturdays. But we'll start doing Saturdays. But we're going to pick certain verticals that we want to, like we did before, that we want to kind of move down the path of. So sorry we ran over again. We did the best we could. We went through a lot of questions. I'm going to go ahead and let Mickey do mic checks. If you're an educator, please raise your hand and your digital hand, and we'll bring you in. And while you guys do that, I'm going to try to fix my camera because I'm a little low on my camera, and I've been that way since we started. So so go ahead and raise your digital hand, and we'll bring you in, and then Mickey will start working on mic checks as you come in.
Alrighty, hey guys. Same as
I'm just
usual.
gonna
Please.
drop out, Mickey.
Oh sure. Alrighty. Have a good day, Hasmuk. Go back to attendee. All right. Yeah, please put your first name, last name, and location in Zoom. And on the meter, the goal is to hit -24 on the short term. Let's start off with Roscoe and then move on to Paul afterwards. Paul
All right.
Prusakowski.
I will try and get to 24. Let's see where I'm going here. And my 25, 26, 27. Yeah, I'm going to have to yell a little bit. I'm on a weak system for some reason. I've got as much chemistry. I haven't put in an audio hijack on the M1. It isn't approved yet, so I don't have as much gain as I used to. Boy, I'm having a hard time getting up there. I've got as much as I've got, Mickey.
Yeah,
I'll have to
more
talk
coffee.
louder. Yeah, thank you.
Paul and then Bruce Francis.
Are you talking to me?
No, Paul Prusakowski, and I apologize. It's a bit of a tongue twister. I guess we'll go round back to them. Bruce and then Emily Russo afterwards.
Okay, let me see if this is coming in okay. Can you make out the sound at this point? I'm looking at, what do we need? Go down or up?
Down, Bruce.
Okay, hang on. Let me get my connection here. And down. Okay, that means, is this getting any better when it goes down now? Is it, how does it sound at that point? Let's see if it's changing at all. Am I on the right thing? Am I getting anything different coming up?
I think you're about there now.
Good. Okay, that's
Right.
good. Let's leave it
Excellent.
at that. Thanks.
Great, Bruce. Emily and then Chris Clark.
Good morning from very rainy and chilly Red Hook, New York. Just glad it's not a nor'easter like they were expecting. And it looks like I'm a little bit quiet. I hate touching things.
I think you're
Am I
about
okay?
there. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Right, cool. Thanks, Emily. Chris and then Kent afterwards.
Good morning from sunny Tempe, Arizona. It's cold here, but cold is all relative, isn't it? How am I looking on a little hot?
Yeah, bump down a bit,
Yeah.
Chris.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That looks good from here.
Yeah, I think you're about there now. Kent
Thank
and
you.
then Aaron.
Good morning. Things are also about the same in Salem, Oregon, where we have rain and cold, and I'm a little bit hot, it looks like, so I'm going to turn down a little bit. Oh, go up. Okay.
Yeah,
So
overshot
going
a bit there.
And did I go too far, Mickey? Or is it in the neighborhood now where we need to be? I see a -25. So is it working? Are we good?
Just give us the slightest nudge down, Kent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Just a little bit. Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, Aaron and then Tony afterwards.
Good morning from Boston, where it is raining very hard right now and is very cold. And I think we're gonna get about 4 to 8 inches of snow. So hopefully, it'll look beautiful, but not a huge fan of the cold.
So yeah, maybe just give us a dB or two up, Aaron.
Okay. It's gonna be 4 to 8 inches of snow, and not looking forward to shoveling that this afternoon or tomorrow morning, but it is living in Boston.
All right. On that change you did, just split the difference on that. But you're in the ballpark. Tony, and then we'll check back in with Paul afterwards.
Hello, office hours.
I hope you can hear me this morning. It's a cloudy day. Nope, the sun has come out. So it's a nice shiny day. I hope everyone is doing well.
Tony, on your ATEM, give us 2 clicks down on your level.
Okay, so I'm excited that I have my Mac Mini. It's working fantastically. I'm enjoying it. It is awesome. I'm using the 1C this morning, and I retired my iPhone for today.
Yeah, I think you're in the ballpark there. Paul?
Okay. Hi, it's Kara and Paul. He's doing the sound check for me. We're in Florida today. Can you guys hear me? Yes? Yeah?
There's yeah, we can hear you. There's just a lot of background noise.
Oh, there is. Okay. Interesting. Okay. We must have another mic
And
somewhere.
now it's clean. Yeah, now it's
Oh,
clean.
okay. It's clean now. Okay, great. Awesome. So we're having a beautiful day here in Florida. Actually, it's perfect kind of fire weather. So maybe have a fire later tonight. I saw Emily had a polar, and it's making me a little jealous because I love seltzer water. I don't know who else loves seltzer water, but it's a staple in our household. So how are we doing now? Are we okay with
Maybe just another dB or 2 down.
Okay, a dB or 2 down, Paul, and I think we're good to go.
Yeah, and is Paul coming in on a separate channel?
That's a good question. He's going to jump in later. He's just going to let me go for the hour for education.
Copy that. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. And Roscoe?
Roscoe?
Yeah, I swapped out my microphone, so I just wanted to see if I got a little more level, and I do, so I'm good. So I probably went from a pile to a pulsum.
Okay, Alex is still kind of out of the panel. Was that okay? Did you finish the check, Mickey?
Yeah. Well, yeah. For Roscoe, just a bit more energy, I guess. Like it's still a little low, but you're there. We can hear you.
All good. Everyone checked.
Microphone, Alex.
Except for me. Hello. All right. All right. So everyone's all checked. Sorry, I walked away. Got some tea. All right. Next, what do we got, Bill?
We've got a lot of questions in today, and we're starting with a Chris Clark question. He is concerned about January, February in education. Educator burnout multiplied by our habitual holiday shift away from school, work, and planning for reflection, professional development, and so forth, to family, home, and recovery. How are the district leaders getting in front of this in this education system?
I see Emily just shaking her head. Everyone's like, nothing. They're not doing anything. I mean, we just, in the biggest spike that we've had in the state's history, my kids got sent back to school. Like they're like, okay, now you're gonna go back to physical classes. I was like, who thought of that? Like, anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead. So my I guess my experience as a teacher is no one's actually looking out the front windshield. They're just kind of like looking at the steering wheel like this. Okay, we set a date in September that we're going to start, so we're just going to start there. That's how it looks to me. Anyway, Emily and then Ken.
Yeah, so not a lot is being like preemptively done. And the thing I think that is getting to me most right now is that the anxiety is going up again, because here in New York, we're up over 6% in my counties where my schools are. The last time we closed,
and you can define that's 6%. That's 6%.
6% positive of those tested. So it's only the people that have been tested. So then that's not even a good representation. But 6 weeks ago, we were at 1%. So to go from that to 6%, and then my dad went and got tested yesterday, and the nurse told him that people avoided getting tested before Thanksgiving because they wanted to travel and wanted to go see family. And then the numbers spiked up this week, and they're like, oh, like, where'd this spike come from? Because it takes so many days for it to show up, yada, yada, yada. But it was because people were actively not getting tested. And you can see that because New York shows us on a graph, like, how many people tested per day and how many positive out of those tested. And so you can actually see the numbers drop right before Thanksgiving and then go way up again after Thanksgiving. And so anyway, with the educators, it's like, everything's arbitrary. New York shut down. De Blasio said 3%. They came up with that number to make the unions happy, to make the parents happy, to make everybody happy, because they were at 0.9 when schools opened. And then they get to 3%, they close the schools and everybody loses their minds. And they're like, that's ridiculous. Teachers just don't want to work and blah, 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 blah. And we need to work to get the economy open. And it just comes back to this whole, like, we should have done something as a country to support the people who can't just take time off or work from home, to, eliminate this problem. And instead we're just doing triage in the moment. Instead, we're fixing the plane while we're flying it, like we said back in July, and we're not planning ahead. And then as an educator, every day, as today the day, I have a go bag at work. It's like every piece of tech and stuff that I need to take home, I take it home every night with me, because they might call it tonight that I don't, I won't go back into my office tomorrow. And so that's really frustrating, and it gives you anxiety. So if you have a classroom full of kids who you don't see on a regular basis, or, you only see a couple days a week, it's like, oh, did I give them everything they needed? Are they going to be okay? And it's just this constant anxiety level. And I think the burnout's going to be real. To Chris's point, in February, people are just going to be like, I can't physically or mentally deal with this anymore. And we have to do something better.
I think the interesting thing is it's this kind of large scale example of being connected to what you hope is going to happen versus what is actually happening. And I think that we get to see it as this kind of very blunt, you watch all these schools oscillate back and forth. If they took on that hope is not a strategy and said, hey, we don't know what's going to happen, so we're just going to keep everybody home. And we're going to figure out, we're going to spend the $33 billion that we got, not on plexiglass, but on making sure the teachers have the equipment that they need and everything else, and the students have what they need to actually do this. And we're just going to take that school year off. Not off, but we're going to build it and make it work. You'd have an entirely different reality. And this is not something that is connected to school. I'm saying this is a generalization. What kills events, what kills projects is oscillation. Oscillation, and the way I think of it is, you've got a nice little, whatever it is that's kind of attached, let's say your little Lego thing. If you take it and just shake it like this, eventually everything falls apart because you're shaking it all. That's oscillation, right? And so oscillating between, we're going to do this, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do this. And I'll tell clients all the time in production that the most important thing is to decide something and then just do it. Doing what you decided to do is going to be more important than changing your mind constantly. And that's the thing that really, chews up productions, and it's chewing up the school system right now. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It's just going to be.
Go ahead, Emily. Yeah.
Sorry. The NWA testing came out too this week, which is the K-12 testing company. And the points lost, the COVID slide everybody was worried about, although the test was, the data is not perfect, they didn't lose nearly as much as everybody was freaking out about. The people that lost were the people that need more help. So our IEP, our ENL kids, kids that don't have support structures, those kids lost some points, and that needs to be addressed. And maybe we should have used that 33 billion or whatever the number was to actually come up with a system to support those people above what we're doing already. And then realize that all that data about, they have to be back in school because they're going to lose a whole year is actually just fear hype. It's not based in science, data, or logic.
They're losing their ability to remember things that they'll never use for the rest of their lives. All right. I mean, for a lot of this, when they talk about the slide, it's like tests. It's tests of things that I watch when I help I'm helping my kids, and I watch some of the stuff, and I'm like, when are we ever going to use this? Anyway. So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I think Chris's question is really good, because it does get to the heart of the matter, which is people were asked to do one of the most difficult semesters ever in their life, and they're exhausted, but we are about to cross that next hill. We watch the Navy SEALs, they go through incredibly horribly hard things, but they don't have time to rest because the next thing is coming up. And it's a little bit like that, I think, from what I've seen, is people are really trying to recover from what just happened, but they also were trying to figure out, how do I regroup for the next semester? So yeah, it's tough. It's not relenting yet anyway.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Quick resource, compassionfatigue.org. There's some really great information there. I have found myself struggling with this in the last 2 weeks. Just literally almost to the point where I don't know how I'm going to do my job the next day, the next week.
Yeah. So it'll be, go ahead, Dan.
Selfishly, I'm a little excited about it because, you know, everything in higher ed moves at kind of a snail's pace, upgrades and technology and all this. And I'm getting to spend money on equipment in the classrooms that, and from doing remote learning. So I hope that my excitement has helped the faculty when I'm training them on how to do things. But I you know, but hope's not a plan, right, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's just a real opportunity to change the way we learn, you know, and I think that could be permanent, and I think that there's a real opportunity there because, you know, school has been pretty broken for a long time. I would argue, at least since I started. You know, you know, like, so I mean, 45 years ago, it was broken. It was horribly broken then. And so there's an opportunity to kind of figure out how we do things differently. And I think that it hasn't broken now. It's just that it's all the spikes are sticking out that you can see them. Go ahead, Chris, and then Benjamin.
Thanks, everyone. That answers my question.
Very good.
Oh, we solved it. Okay, moving on, I guess.
No, well, Benjamin had a point.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just real quick from like a student perspective.
Benjamin, from the student perspective.
I mean, so I'm a high school senior, and this time right now is the classic between Thanksgiving and winter break crunch. It's like 3 weeks of school for most places, and it's somehow every educator seems like thinks that you need to assess every kid in these 3 weeks, which means you get stacked up assessments. And right now, I know for some folks who are in full distance learning right now or whatever, that's really difficult. And for me, at least as a high school senior, trying to complete college applications and all that while dealing with remote learning and all that sort of thing, it's hard.
As a senior, do you feel like you're missing out on your senior year? Is it something that bothers you?
It's a really good question. I think really bothers my classmates, and I think
And why doesn't it bother you? Why does it not bother you and bother them?
I think I've been looking forward to a lot of things I'm still getting to do, whether that be privileges or leadership positions in clubs or like taking classes I'm really excited about. Like that's what really excites me. Like we don't have our on-campus senior lounge, but I'm not sure I was really excited about that. For some people, those kind of perks are the key. That's like it drives them to be there, right? This like special privilege of being the big people on campus, right? So.
Yeah. No, the reason I ask is I do think that we focus on a lot of folks that are negatively impacted, but I don't think we pay attention to, there are a fair number of students that are either not impacted or positively impacted, you know, and I say that as a kid who, you know, hated being around other kids. You know, like when I was in school, pretty much from the time I was 6 or 7, as Chris would probably tell you, I spent most of my time with adults, you know, as I got older, very quickly. And so I look at it from that view, I think is that I didn't particularly integrate very well. And so I think that there are a group of students that this is not necessarily a negative impact. It's not all of them are falling through the cracks. Next question.
Moving on, Laura Thompson says, whoops, I made a mistake and I double click. Let me go back and get that. What features what features could Apple need to drop in an M series eMac Mini or eMac Air so that the cost to schools would be a challenge to the Chrome OS computers that education has all over them now?
I'm waiting for the educators to jump in there, but I would say that the real thing that Google has is the infrastructure, the classroom infrastructure. I don't think that Apple has the same classroom infrastructure that manage it. I mean, I watch my kids do it, and there's just a lot of pieces to that puzzle that I don't think Apple is really solving. It's not the hardware; it's the how they run the classes. Go ahead, Emily.
So one of the things that we need to think about is price point. And so but the price point argument that I have is that if Apple can bring it down to $600, $700, $800 in that range per device, and then you talk about Chromebooks, you know, being $300 to $400 a device, the Apple has better, like it's a fully working machine, and I can actually put CAD software on there, and I can do things for all the different classes that I'm doing, like anatomy and things like that. Whereas the Chromebook, the web-based apps are super limited in what's available to the teachers. So making the argument for the Apple is easier, but it ultimately comes down to price, like cost.
Well, but here's a question I have for you. When does the iPad, so if I've been talking to a couple school systems about, if they, some school systems are looking at the next stimulus package, right? And so I'm working on writing a paper about it, but I've been talking to a bunch of them about it. And the structure that we're talking about, if we got a lot of money, what would, I was asked, what would you do? And my thing was, I would get teachers the M1 Air, and I would get the students iPads. So I'm not looking at how to give students Chromebooks. It's iPad Airs or iPads with keyboards that they can still join Google Classrooms with. So so they can still do Google Classrooms, but they now have a creation device, not a drone device. I think of the Chromebooks as drone devices. So if you want to be a drone, that's what you have. But if you want to actually create something, you need something different. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah. So then what you would need is the iPads to be capable to hold a Zoom or Gmeet meeting and also access the website that the teacher's trying to share with the students or wants them to work on. And
I believe they still can do that, right?
If it's a new iPad and you can do the split screen, you can. But for the ones that the schools currently have, no. That's the biggest problem we've run into. And then students have complained about writing papers on iPads. Even with the keyboards, they don't like it.
Go ahead, Benjamin. And then Aaron.
Just real quick, for 3 years, my daily driver was an iPad. And as a middle school student, when you're doing a lot of writing, I totally agree with Emily here. It's a real pain. I would go seek out another device to do that on. And then the other thing right now is, even if you do a split screen with Zoom and another app, let's say a favorite would be Kahoot. So let's say you're playing a Kahoot game and you're doing Zoom. You could have that in split screen on newer devices, but then you don't see people's cameras. Cameras are only on when Zoom is in full screen on an iPad. So that's some enhancements on Zoom's side, but also inherently iPads with Zoom means it's challenging to do anything else besides be in a Zoom call.
Good. Aaron?
So what I found with my students is that a lot of them now are doing the 2-screen method, that they'll have their school Chromebook and then an iPad or something else to work with, which I told them would be the easiest way to do their work. However, the students have said when they're using their iPad to do Google apps like Google Slides, Google Docs, things like that, it's really difficult for them. So it would just be a little bit more difficult on an iPad, I think, from just my perspective.
Yeah. I know it's good. I mean, again, for me, the thing has been, and I will admit that I think that all of schools should be around creation, like creating things, and that we learn math because we're building robots, and we learn chemistry because we're cooking, and we learn things like you should be making things all the time, and everything you learn goes around that. And so when I see devices that you can't create with very well, and I don't look at, in my world, I work in a lot of Fortune 10 companies. Nobody writes long form anymore. So like when I look at how to write a long paper, I'm like, they're never going to use that again. like it's unless they're a journalist, and maybe even not then, they're never going to write more than 3 or 4 pages again. Unless if you're in academia or government or something else, you might, but everybody else builds slides. Slide decks. Slide decks is the blood that runs every major company that I work with is slide decks. And so when kids aren't learning how to build really good keynote documents or really good slide documents or whatever, I feel like that is way more important than learning how to write long form. I do think it's very important for people to understand specifically Strunk and White. I know I'm dogmatic about that, but I'm like, there's one little book, do all those things, and no one will complain, and no one does them. So go ahead, Cara.
Oh, I was just going to say, as an instructional designer, some of the interactive pieces that I make, when I hear that the learners are mostly going to be on an iPad, there are certain features that are just thrown out the door, which is unfortunate because there's no mostly hover. You can't hover over something and have the text pop up. So if they're going to be doing the interactive module on an iPad, you have to make it that they have to click on it, and it's just it's just a thing. There's not as good of drag and drop sometimes as well.
What do you build your interactive stuff in?
Articulate Storyline for the most part is what I use. Storyline is my flagship, I would say. Yeah.
Storyline.
But I also use a different authoring tool called Bracken. But yeah, drag and drop is thrown out the window for some of those authoring tools when you know that the learner's on an iPad, which is really unfortunate because those are really fun activities to use in a course. Right. So yeah.
Absolutely. That's good. Next question.
Next question, and it's the one I missed from Laura Thompson of Beaumont, Texas. What's the best approach for classes that require more hands-on, for example, anatomy labs and so forth?
Go ahead, Dan.
Wolf Vision makes a very good camera that we mount up in the ceiling in some of our medical PT classrooms, not exactly anatomy, but and then they roll in a bed, or they'll do some, and it has like a laser beam that shoots down on the floor, so you know when you're rolling something underneath it where you are, and then we use that and we share that as a source in the room. We have 3 screens, and so yeah, Wolf Vision. I can share a link in the comments.
Good, Benjamin, and then Laura.
It really depends about like what your goal is educationally, right? If you're just kind of talking through the processing data and understanding experiments, like there's something there that you can do by like taking a video of somebody else doing the experiment. And if you're really trying to impart the experience of doing the thing, it's a lot harder.
Go ahead, Laura.
These are nursing students, pre-physical therapy students who are at a very high level, needing to do like almost like I don't know if they have a cadaver, but when I went through it, it was an actual human cadaver lab. And would you lean more towards in class with social distancing, or trying to even trying to virtualize that? Because right now our university is doing a hybrid model where they're only in the classroom every 3 weeks. So every 3rd lesson, they're getting hands-on, and I'm seeing my students struggle.
Yep, good, Carl.
Okay, there we go. So I have a background in anatomy and physiology, and so of course I got the opportunity to learn with a cadaver in a lab, and I don't think that there is much of a replacement for that because I had books and I had all of it, and there is just definitely a way of learning things about tissue and muscles and tendons and how they fit and how they connect and all of that by actually seeing it. But I do have a friend at the Eastern Michigan University who is again struggling with this answer as well for his students, and he sent them he actually made little 3D printed models of the lower limb, and so he has a pelvis and he has the whole lower limb, and then he sends them the fish wire, for instance, and the student actually has to decide where the connection, like where the attachment and where the insertion of the muscles and the tendons are, and they can explore and try different things. And I mean, I think that actually sounds really cool and really fun and very valuable, to the point where I wonder if it actually might even be a little bit better than seeing this is how it is in a human body. But like, if you actually got the opportunity to explore, making mistakes, in my opinion, is a huge learning. So just seeing how it is and just being able to feel how it is in a body is one thing, but making the mistakes and learning from those mistakes is key too. So I can connect you with him, Laura, because I've had a couple of other like PT schools and things that have approached and asked me about that, and he's trying to see if he can scale up that as a little kit to send to students.
One of the things that I was thinking about there is I've worked with a client that has billion-dollar devices that if they fail, number one is they take about $40,000 an hour to run. So if you turn it on, like for someone to learn how to use it, let's just say take it into the air, it costs $40,000 per hour for them to learn how to fly that thing. And if they screw it up, it'll cost billions of dollars and people will die. So I think it's a good model for like, how do we not use it all the time? And so number one is there's an incredible amount of ground school of exactly how understanding how it works. Then there is simulators that you can do everything without dropping it into the ground. If you crash it, you can still walk away. Sometimes people can actually get hurt in the simulators, but anyway, it's a whole other thing. But the other thing they move to really heavily is virtualizing the cockpit. So that you are able to do everything, and you have things that you're able to touch and everything in a virtual world. So that the idea is that you spend as many hours as you can on that before you get, because the simulator is costly to use as well. And so you have to, there's this like, progression where you do need flight time. There's just no other way to avoid flight time, but because it's just reps. I was a couple weeks ago, I think I mentioned I got to fly a helicopter, and only for a minute. Because it was really scary. Anyway, but I flew the helicopter. We were already in the air. I didn't have to land it. I have a whole new respect for helicopter pilots, because it's just very small motions move the helicopter a lot. And that is just, to get back to your point, it's just reps. The pilot just said, you just have to do it over and over again until you can feel it, right? And that's what you have to do in physiology. But same thing, whole lot of time on the ground, whole lot of time figuring things out, simulation, everything else. And I think that we don't have very good tools in that area right now where we can really simulate it. I built a simulator for someone for their classroom for their physiology, and they were dealing mostly with heart lung. And what we did is we had it set up where you could actually rotate, the heart around and draw on it, and hit a button and pull it open, and then draw on that, and so the thing is their ability to teach it and to really break it up and so on and so forth. And the idea was it was very easy to talk about and to draw on it and have it, and people could point at things and their little pointer would show up. And this is all kind of bespoke that we built for it. But I felt like you learned a lot more than you can learn from a book or from a video or from whatever, because you can interactively. Here's the thing is with teaching is being able to interactively, what we don't have is a lot of good tools for interactively discussing something. I can pull something apart in front of you, draw on it, talk about it, rotate it around. All those things are all, like I can have that conversation with you, and it's not a video, and it's not something the student's interacting with. The teacher can interact with it and discuss it with the students and have it at their fingertips. And I feel like that at your fingertips piece is still missing in a lot of our education, because it's hard. And I think that we have a unique opportunity right now to do more in that area. Go ahead, Chris, and then John, then Emily.
This isn't exactly to your point, Laura, to your question, but these times might provide nursing students with opportunities to focus more on learning the possibilities and limitations of telemedicine. What can be done and is more likely to be done in the medium range future was not a part of the traditional nursing curriculum, but we need people who can step into a job as a newly licensed nurse and be able to operate the technology and the distance communication and so forth and so on that is more and more required. So, easy for me to say and hard to pivot in higher education, but and Kara's smirking.
But Kara and then John. No, still silent.
Okay. I have a little clicker to take myself off mute. I'm smirking because I actually created a company that uses video analysis tools for patient rehabilitation. And one of my goals when I started this company, it's a very passion project. I barely make any money with it. It's very passionate. But the reason is because I don't believe that we should be teaching people about motion, especially about human motion, with books and words. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And I've taught gait and biomechanics in the past. And I'm smirking because my students, I taught gait and biomechanics online using video analysis tools where they actually can draw an angle on a patient's limb and find out if they are at the normal, within the normal range, and make a decision. And they all put their hands up like, well, you know, this isn't real. This isn't normal. It's like, well, or we're not getting that patient experience. And I'm like, you weren't going to actually have like 20 patients come in here and walk in front of you anyways. So let's just like lower that. And this was like 5 years ago and they all hated online learning. And so we ended up having to switch. But now I'm trying to group patient videos of real life patients with disabilities so that all of the students around the globe can learn from these videos. And every single university will not share their videos with another university. And I'm like, why can't we just send out a patient, you know, consent form that says these videos will only be shared within a private model. They're not going on YouTube, a private, you know, place for students to then have access to more videos to see how people move, and especially, you know, people with disabilities that we're trying to, you know, intervene with. So it's just been a huge hassle that I'm very passionate about, and I really want to get this sharing of content, but the universities will not share. Yeah.
Yeah. John?
I'll follow up on that because we did a lot of video analysis in our teacher prep program, and it is a real problem with sharing. But the point I wanted to bring up, Alex, was a colleague of mine had an interesting experience doing a simulation. It was, again, a piece of equipment, very expensive, limited numbers. So they taught the repair technicians through, this is the days of interactive video disc where you could jump around. So, and touch screens. So the way that the people did maintenance on this device is they would touch the rack, and then the circuit board would come out, and then they'd have a model of the circuit board, and they would touch various points, and they could touch and get a voltmeter, they could touch and get an amp meter, and then they would be able to touch where they wanted the clips to be. It was a 12-week training before the people were able to even get near the real equipment, and it was very successful. But once they put the first set of people out there, they had increased shock reports. They spent 12 weeks teaching if you want to measure voltage, you know, stick your finger here and your finger there. So the modification on the training is we had to take this is a nice pin, but we had to take one of those cheap government pins. We stuck a wire on it and said, this is your logic test probe. And they went through the whole 12 weeks touching the screen with a pin rather than their finger.
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, thank you. This is actually for office hours. This is why I'm here, this whole experience today. So I'm so grateful to be here. Kara, to your question, again, my imagination from story background is, it feels like we're trying to homogenize a single solution for everybody's problem. And I think what I'm hearing in this, from the different Benjamin's perspective and from Chris's perspective and Bruce's perspective, is that while we are all human, we have that in common, and while we all are alive, we have that in common. There are certain concepts that we have in similarity that we can aggregate and then homogenize and create a single answer for. But what I'm hearing you say is the nuances after a certain point, we need to start customizing. And I heard that concept with regards to shoes. Originally were made for one person by one person, and then Payless showed up. And now billions of shoes are all supposed to fit the same humans. And that's, anyway, so I'm hearing a conflict
and that generalization meant that more humans could have shoes, you know, so that, you know, it was useful in that sense that before you couldn't afford the shoe. So, you know, I think that there is this weight, there is the balance of bespoke versus mass production. There are general topics that and this is what I get into when I say, oh, we should do a classroom with 1,200 people or 2,000 people. It's because I feel like there are general subjects that we can cover that we can produce really high quality versions of that cover most of it. And then the goal is to actually leave us with more time to work on the bespoke issues. But right now, when we reproduce, when we multiply, when we have 40,000 physics teachers basically teaching the same thing, you know, we get into a situation where it's a lot of energy spent that if we centralized it just a little, we could actually spend more time on the folks that are moving faster and more time that are folks that are falling behind because we have more resources available to them. It's, and so, and so that's the issue is that it's not getting less resources. It's just reapplying those resources so that the generalized subjects can be handled across a larger number of people quickly. And then you can pay attention to all the little things. You can pay more attention to it. I always think of one of my favorite quotes from a movie is from The Incredibles and says, when everybody's special, then no one is. So the thing is that we have to think about how we generalize those solutions so that can, be taught to everyone. And I do think that there are generalized things like video, audio, tutorials, challenges. Those things can be, and we're going to be next year. This space, like office hours, especially Saturdays, is going to be a huge lab in playing with this idea. Where we're mixing video and audio and challenges and getting people to learn. And we're going to be learning visual tools, but that's not the point. The point is that we're going to learn how to learn and how to teach in a different way, because I think that that's what's next. Next question.
As I need 3 times to really learn something, remind me your definition of bespoke, please.
Oh, bespoke is that it's built custom. So, it's not mass produced. It's not a bespoke event is something that you design the event for that one piece, or and people overuse it because they'll use bespoke and it really is still mass production. So it makes it confusing. But generally, when you're talking about bespoke, like if we're going to do a whole bunch of webinars that everyone's going to do across the company, that's not bespoke. When I get, so like what I specialize in is bespoke events. I don't do something that you can do over and over and over again. Generally, usually once it gets to that, I hand it off to another team. So what I work on is I get brought in and we look at the problem and we look at what needs to be solved, and then we build a custom solution for that problem. And that's what I work on. It's not reproducible. The goal is down the road, it'll be reproducible. But for most of my career, I haven't done that. I just customize a specific problem, whether it's, again, solutions for, big things or little things. And then you figure out how to reproduce it. And then it becomes not bespoke. It becomes a system. When it stops being a bespoke, it's a system. And I like to look for systematizing things, but usually I'm so busy doing bespoke, I hand off systems to somebody else and then move on to the next bespoke problem. Next question.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, bespoke came out of the British tailoring industry, and it's a suit made for you, just for you, nobody else.
Tailored. I guess another word for bespoke is tailored. That's perfect, Bill.
Yeah.
Next question.
Benjamin Andaput of San Carlos, and here in the panel, my high school backstage theater crew trying to pivot to remote virtual opportunities. We've been producing recorded events, but I want to move us toward live virtual events. Suggestions for exciting small practice projects. And he notes we have a limited access to the school theater with lightings, audio, and some camera gear.
I'm still interested in, I feel like we haven't seen Hollywood do it very well, but I think that readings, like dramatic readings of plays in something like Zoom could be really interesting, especially with different backgrounds. Like you could match backgrounds between people, and if you edited it together with Spotlight, so it's not just them, not a grid of us all talking, but like really cut a show that's live. I think that would be interesting, but I don't know for sure, Bill.
I always, when I'm trying to do something that has a small story that's achievable, I look at fables. You can do the Three Little Pigs. You can do Goldilocks. You can modernize. You can make it ancient. But those are simple, concise stories that everybody understands.
Yep. I'm waiting for Roscoe to raise his hand, but there's no Roscoe. No, he's like, no, not going to play. All right, fine. Oh, good, Roscoe.
Sorry, I'm actually on doing a search, so I'm sorry, I'm not available.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, Emily.
So Chris showed me something yesterday, and of course he's not home right now, but it was a production that they did in Zoom, and they all made their backgrounds the right way so that they made a production, and they even lined up the squares so that the background continued, and it was really, really interesting to look at visually. But then my suggestion as a former theater teacher is radio shows, like old-timey radio shows in a Zoom are so much fun. So
yeah, and I think anyway, so yeah, I think that there's a lot of different things there playing. Go ahead, Chris.
By the way, Emily, your husband Chris asked us at 7 o'clock this morning to say hello to you. He wasn't going to be around, but he passed that off to the group.
That's great. Go ahead, Roscoe. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah. Same thing Emily just said. Moving the blocks around, and then doing an overlay is how we're doing the sets. So this, you actually take the Zoom layout, but then you build a set around that layout. That's how we've done a couple that way.
Go ahead, Benjamin.
Yeah, what we've been doing most recently is been asking folks to record with QuickTime Player on their computer, just record their video simultaneously to the recording the Zoom, and then doing a little bit of sync up, and making our own custom grid with their video with some other sets and images. And it's a super cool idea. It just gets a little boring if you're doing an hour of it. So I like these ideas of potentially, although I know virtual backgrounds lead to some disappointing results, for this, it might be doable.
Also, think about your virtual backgrounds are something that has to do in real time. You can get better keying tools, so you can get everybody to deliver QuickTime files and then key them in post rather than doing it with an automatic. That gives you more room. You can move people around. You can do all kinds of other things inside of a frame. The thing a lot of times when I talk to filmmakers who have this, I want to make a 20-minute film or I want to make an hour-and-a-half film, I often talk about how much we as consumers are used to what we're used to watching, right? And so when you watch a one hour TV show, just know that most of them cost $75,000 a minute. Like that's little. That's the lower budget Netflix shows are $75,000 a minute. The rumor is the Apple stuff is $200,000 to $300,000 a minute. So when you start doing long form video, just know that that's what everybody else is watching all day when they're not watching your thing, right? And that's why TikTok is so successful, is because it's 1 minute long, and so because you don't have to fill that space, you can fill a minute. Filling a minute is a different thing. And I will say, as someone who has built a bunch of TikToks for other people, and then with my kids, teaching them to do filmmaking. Now, I admit that I got so busy with COVID that I stopped doing them, but it ends in February, right before we were about to do a whole other round of them. I suddenly just thumped out and I haven't had many days off since. But my kids, how I was teaching them filmmaking, and this is how we'll go back to it once things settle down, is TikTok. And the reason for TikTok is because it's 1 minute long. Do it with your phone. There's a low expectation, but the last one one of the last ones that I did, if you go up to McDubby's or whatever on the McDubby's on TikTok, you'll see one that I shot with a 6K Blackmagic camera. The one about the chipper is a Blackmagic camera shot in log. I did LUTs on it. I did all the bits and pieces that I wanted to do to make that look good, but it was only a minute long, or 30 seconds long or something like that. I didn't, and the thing is that I went through with my kids all the steps of making a film. I just did it in a really small bucket that I could put up that isn't boring, and so I would recommend really thinking about stretching out an entire story over a long period of time to do it well, where people will actually watch it and not just be nice, is something that I would highly recommend. Thinking of a long piece as 3 minutes, and 60 to 90 seconds is a great number for building little skits, and I would recommend thinking about it. Even Saturday Night Live, when they get to 3 or 4 minutes, most of them are bad. Let's be clear. Like most of them, you're like, okay, let's go on to the next one. Like the majority of them, we always remember the 1 or 2 that are really funny. And so we keep on coming back for that 1 or 2, but most of the ones that last longer than that, not that funny. Anyway, Bruce.
I've become somewhat of an addict to TikTok videos, and I'm wondering, has anybody really started to use them for formal education, possibly use them in classrooms, making videos of that sort, rather than the ones I've seen that teach small bits are often brilliant, and it seemed to be great possibilities there. And I'm wondering if anybody is aware of formal attempts to make them part of education.
Go ahead, Paul.
I've watched TikTok for a couple days and just to see what's on there, and basically every 10th or 20th video is a little instructional video. Like somebody put a video out there like how you make money writing children's books. You go on Amazon, you do the research, and then you hire somebody on Fiverr, and it's a lot of them are kind of get rich quick schemes. But there are some serious ones also.
If you like them, if you just as a little note, if you like the how-tos, it stops being 1 out of every 10. It starts being every other one. Like TikTok, basically customizes to what you like. So like I don't like dance routines, so I don't see any because I just skip them immediately. But I do like instructional videos. So every second or third video is instructional video on my end because that's what I like when I watch it, or me and my kids. My kids and I watch it on the screen. We airplay it to the big TV. Anyway, Bill.
Yeah, one of my friends from early in the Final Cut days was Thomas Grove Carter, who's an excellent editor in London at Trim Editing. And we were talking one day, and he was telling me that one of his practices is he's working already to a 60-second commercial or maybe a 2-minute Ed Sheeran video or something for BMW. He will create that, which is itself a hugely compressed, get it right, lots of money is on the line thing. But then as his practice, he will go in and say, can I tell this story in 30 seconds? And he will cut the 60 to a 30, and then he will take the 30 and say, how close can I get it? Can I do it in 12 seconds? He is constantly refining and reducing and trying to see where is the essence of the story in this and how close can I take it before it falls apart.
Commercials are a really good example of 30-second films, because oftentimes they have budgets that are like 30-second films, but they are some of our favorite commercials. A whole story gets told in 30 seconds. And so it's just a matter of design. Mickey?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I'm sure like most people on the panel are aware of this, but like content is king. Like Benjamin mentioned that they have limited access to equipment. That's not the important thing. Like the meat is the important thing, the content, because like you could record stuff on your webcam on your phone, and it should be just fine if the content is there, if it's rich in content.
And the balance is how much talent is in front of the camera. There's things that we can watch that have horrible quality, but whatever is in front of it is so visceral, or the person is so attention grabbing that we'll watch it anyway. You can have lower quality production values if you have more talent in front of the camera, and you need we have a lot of talent here. we have a whole panel full of talent, and so people watch for a long time. But I think that for the most part, you want to think about that as well. But be hard on yourself. I guess I would say the last thing I would say on this is be rough. Like you want to create an environment inside your production group that it's okay to pick at it. Like inside of my projects, we pick. Like someone will look at it and say, that's amazing. And I can tell them the 80 things that I don't like about it. I don't like the background. This is whatever. And it's okay. Like you want to make it okay. Like it doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means it's good and all these other things could be better, and you want to have good and all the time. I think that there's a culture inside of production in general and education, in my opinion, that wants to pat everybody on the head and say, you did a good job, and not give people. But I think that there is my kids are used to being picked at, and they'll pick at my stuff. Like I'll make breakfast for them, a really nice breakfast, and they'll be like, there's something missing here. Like my kid, like the first thing that comes out of their head will be like, I think that there's something missing. I don't think you have enough salt, or you have too much salt, or there was a little bit of, the last time you did it, you did this little thing. And that's the culture in our family, is that you can literally lead as someone working on something for you with a complaint. And we're totally fine with that, because that makes us better, and I think that I think that in our culture, we've gotten really into this, like we can just say everything's okay. And I think that in production, especially in production, you want to think about making it okay to say everything's not okay. In fact, I literally worked on Star Wars, and I can tell you all the things I don't like about every shot that I did. And there's a list for every shot that I worked on a feature film that I don't like, so anyway, next question.
Moving on to Tony Adamopoulos of Missouri, who says recommendations for cross-platform iOS, Android, Windows, or Mac laptops device for wirelessly receiving video and audio to be projected on a projector with an HDMI input in a classroom, something like a cross-platform Apple TV.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
would something like a Roku work for that? That they can take all the streams in and then project it? I can't think of anything else like
There
it's
is
besides the Apple
no.
TV.
There is a device, and I'm just trying to get it. I'm trying to fish it out of my head. Benjamin, and then Dan.
Chromecast is a lovely thing if you're on any device that runs Chrome. You can screen share your whole desktop. You can screen share just a tab. Makes it really easy. Connects over the local Wi-Fi network. Works cross-platform.
Go ahead, Dan.
We use Crestron Air Media, and it's actually built into some of our processors in the room. So, but you know, you get a splash screen with an IP address, and you can connect your devices to that and project.
I'm trying to think of the there's a company that you don't think of as someone who would make this, and I just can't. I remember I was at it might be Fujitsu, but they make one that is like the ultimate. You set something down, and it just any device that walks in can attach to it. Go ahead, John, and then Benjamin.
Yeah, there's a device made by Kramer. It's called the IVA-Go, and it's sort of the tank built one. It's industrial strength, and literally any device that can wirelessly stream natively it can do. So it can take it from Android devices and from iPhones, iPads, and it will do full 60 frames per second HD video.
Go ahead, Benjamin.
Just for what it's worth, my school is heavily invested in Apple TVs, and granted we're like driving towards Apple products, but you can use AirParrot. I'll drop a link in chat, which will let Windows devices connect. And if you have other tablets and things, you can get other apps that'll let you connect. But just in general, I found Apple TVs to be remarkably stable.
Next question.
All right, we're moving into initialism soup here. A. Mitchells of Washington says, what are some of the best practices when dealing with things like FERPA, COPPA, high-tech, HIPAA protected information during a Zoom meeting using breakout rooms? Note that this question is admittedly a repeat from yesterday. So since we heard from the Zoom expert that we really need to hear from the education privacy experts today who are already dealing with a lot of things like FERPA. So thanks.
Silent. Go ahead, Dan.
I know we did this for at our university for the student counseling groups, that you can have an agreement with Zoom, and then you can create a group in your account that when you put those host accounts in that group, they have some restrictions like cloud recording, but they are HIPAA compliant, and I don't know if it transfers into, I would imagine, into the breakout room as well. Don't know about that, but that's what's, and then when you're in that group, that's one thing I had to realize and had to tell them, is that you can't be taken out of that group. It's in, they would have to create a new account. We'd have to get them a new license, but they're.
John?
That alphabet soup, a lot of this is rules, regulations, and laws, but they're not a technology issue. Probably the most important thing is training your staff. You know, there's so many things that they need to know that have nothing to do with technology in terms of what information they can release to whom and when. And no technology is going to solve that. It's just for the individual to know this is privileged data or data that I can't share. But I think every university in California has a required training for all their staff. It's just like not taking a certain file home on your laptop. You may be working on your desk, don't copy it to something. So there are technology things in terms of protection for people breaking into systems, but to be compliant, it's really the individuals who have the data, who are sharing with people, need to know the rules and regulations.
Laura, and then Emily, and then Cara.
This was actually my question from yesterday, and that was kind of where I was coming from. John Edelson just hit on. When we dealt with her FERPA protected information, we had the student normally across the desk from us. We brought them into our office. We gave them the FERPA waiver. We talked to them about what it meant. Then we brought parent or whoever back to the office. Without physical control of that environment, we're starting to see things like you know, people trying to drive while they're having an advising appointment, which we do not condone. You know, you cannot concentrate on what I'm telling you and the road at the same time, because we're talking about systems and courses and times and things of that nature. And also the other thing is I'm supporting my administration to some degree with the idea that we kind of went through this in the 5 o'clock hour this morning. The changes to Zoom I sent them a thing yesterday about, look, breakout rooms have gone some changes since we used this in September. You need to make sure that we have those breakout rooms locked down, because we're using one great big Zoom meeting with breakout rooms with an advisor in the breakout rooms. A breakout room is a waiting room for the students, and our host had to pull the students in September. But now if they don't lock that down correctly, the students can jump around, and the breakout rooms are actually the advisors' names. So I really was I've thought through it a little bit more. So
yeah, that's great. Emily?
Well, I basically what now I forgot who was saying it, but the New York this year did the new law, the Ed 2D law, and a big part of that was training everyone in what is acceptable and not acceptable. And even though they were supposed to be compliant as of June this year, and then it got pushed to October, a majority of those trainings haven't happened yet. They rely on Know Before, which is cybersecurity training for the teachers, but they're not doing the specific HIPAA, FERPA, or any of the things that you need to talk to. And what I find is that my school counselors, psychologists, and social workers and people are very frustrated with the things that Laura was talking about, because you're not as safe using Google documents to Google emails. You have to encrypt, and some people just literally don't know how to do that because they haven't been trained. And when I bring that to the administration, a lot of times they're like, yeah, they had that training. And I'm like, but it's supposed to be yearly, and it shouldn't just be like a sit and get. It should be like an active participating, see, when you send it this way, this happens, but when you send it this way, this happens. And did you make sure you set all these settings before you started the meeting? Did you do X, Y, and Z? And that training isn't happening to a great extent yet. And a lot of the districts are also pleading, just resource depletion because of the pandemic. We're spread way too thin. We're doing what we need to do to get by. And I think that that's scary when it comes to those specific privacy issues.
And I think that you always know the difference between people thinking that it's people checking off something that says, yeah, they did it, versus actually being operational. We got an eye opener for that because I was working on something over the summer that was, we were concerned about state actor attacks. and so as a result, we had to go through all this training, and then you're constantly being tested, and, not constantly, but relatively, you can't trust any of the emails you're getting, and you can't do the, and there's this constant, but it was not, did we check it off, but did we actually do it? Know how to do it. And that's a different, and to your point, you have to do it over and over again. Go ahead, Cara. Yep, you're still muted.
Okay, there we go. I just actually, from someone who's been using video in patient care for over 10 years, and it was a huge objection that I got right from the very beginning, as we can't do this, we can't do this. And I just want to encourage people that technology has a lot of potential and opportunity for advancing the way that we practice anything, and to not just stop at, oh, we can't do it because of HIPAA. Just find a way, read the laws. And what I work with people to do most of the time when it is HIPAA is have really good consent forms where you're informing the person exactly how you're going to be using the information and the data that is going to be captured within a recording. And that's, I just, as Grace Hopper said, just because we've always done it one way doesn't mean it's the right way. That's not the right quote, but you know what I mean, is don't stop just because that's the way we've always done it. Continue to encourage the use of technology because of the opportunities it has, and not give up just because we have these barriers.
Absolutely. John?
Alex, you hit on something that's a pet peeve, so I'm going to take just hopefully less than a minute. State of California required 2 hours of sexual harassment training of all faculty and staff at the university. So It was mandated that everyone would take this 2 hours of training. I went through the training. It was an online course. I finished it in 45 minutes. I'm an instructional designer. I was able to answer all the questions. It was real easy. I failed. I wrote him a note. I said, wait, I took the course and I passed every question. I got 100%. And they said, well, you did it in 45 minutes. You have to do it in 2 hours. So I went back into the course, went through again, failed every question, answered it in the most obscene answer to it. I passed successfully. So I was mad. I said, this is crazy. I got a letter the next day going, you need to take the harassment training again. And I said, no, I took it. I'm a faculty member. I said, no, you're also part-time administrator. So we can't transfer your faculty training to our records to the administrator training. So then I went through again. This time in 2 hours, I answered everything wrong. Again, I passed. So I called the guy and said, wait a second. I've taken this twice. I've failed it. And each time I got this letter of successful completion. Don't you guys look at the scores? He says, oh, no, we don't. The law said you have to take 2 hours of training. We don't keep the scores. In fact, we're prohibited from keeping the scores because if we kept the scores and you failed and we did nothing, we would be liable. And to me, this was the worst of government implementation. If there was something I could change, it would be if you're going to do this training and you fail it, somebody ought to look at it. It's just like you're saying, it's a big difference between taking a 2-hour training and actually be successful at it. We have the same thing with our security training. We tell them how they have to fix their passwords. We still do password review. None of the stuff that they supposedly learned in the training really took effect for the majority of the people.
Yep. We're running a little behind, so we're already heavy. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next question.
Okay, it comes from Bruce Francis here in the panel from Naples. What basic skills, ABCs, multiplication tables, and so forth, can better be taught by games and AI-based programs than by teachers in the classrooms? Why not turn such skills over to machines in online education and free teachers for other more advanced activities?
I think that the thing that I've thought about a lot related to that is we were constantly dealing with Google where they want to always automate everything. and so there's always like in Hangouts, like, how do we do this better with the computer doing it? What we really found was the dance of having a human with the technology amplifying them is where it's really powerful. Having the computer do it all one way, the human is really inefficient. They just can only do so much at a time and they can't get to the right granularity. The machine is just not that smart, and so and no matter how much, all of our best computers are probably still couldn't compete with an ant in most things when you think as far as a decision process goes. So, but the mixture of the two is really powerful. I think that, being able to have someone, I think you just always want to think about that as a dance together, not a replacement for a human being, but how do you magnify the human being's ability? Like the little things that I did when I was teaching graphics is just recording. Just recording my thing and letting the students, the advantage of teaching a skill with a record is that the fast students can watch it at 2x and the slow students can rewind, and it's why I don't do lectures anymore generally, is because I want to record it because it actually gives people at all speeds the ability to do it at the speed that they want to do it at. And so then I do Q&A. That's why we don't have long lectures here. So it's, Q&A is important. You want to do that live, but you also want to use the technology to do that. And then I think that there's definitely games that get you better at, stuff. Physics games, for instance, are really good because, you can learn it organically without actually, putting it together. But I think that, I don't know if anyone, I'm just waiting. I'm holding space while I wait for someone else to raise their hand, but no one's going to. So anyway, go ahead, John.
Well, we created programs that we call drill and kill, like flashcards, multiplication tables, and they have a place. They work. It helps some people learn, but I'd hate to have that be the whole diet of learning some of these things.
But, like for me, I talked about like, baking is, chemistry that you can eat, right? Because it's all chemistry, it's all, like how that, how that works. And I think that you could, as an example, have, first videos on how to make bread for kids. But you could be explaining to them what the technology is. So what they're listening to while they're making the bread is what's actually happening, and how, how the yeast works, and how the interactions work, and why the weight makes a difference, and what this activates, and what's the molecular structure of that. And all those things can be, some of it can be audio. They can watch little videos that are next to it, and they learn probably more about it in that process. So you have a bunch of other technologies that are there, but I think that there's, a lot of things in that sense. And then the other things are just being able to come up with things quickly. I mean, I play with my kids. Again, I think I was talking about this. Like, we were playing Kingdom Rush, which is this little desktop tower defense. The level of granularity that they understand that game, I just keep feeling like we got to figure out, to Bruce's point, we got to figure out how do we get that into school? Because, I mean, they know it so well, and they're making all these calculations, and they're making resource allocations of, you can only spend this here, you can only do it here. And it's a very complex interaction. So I think that games are a integral part of what we can do. It's just that we don't do them very well yet. Paul?
Yeah, I just want to know, Alex, when you're going to do a instructional video on how to make artisan bread.
Soon. Well, I don't want to make the instructional video, because even after making lots of them, I don't consider myself an expert. But what I am working on is I'm talking to a couple people who make bread about doing a stream where I send them some gear, and then we all do it together. And again, to my point, what I want to do is, here's a video, here's a book you can read, here's a video that you can watch on how to do it. Here's the instructions on how to do it. Our recommendation is that you do it before we have the event. Then we're answering questions during the event with someone who's an expert. And I feel like that is the instructional process that I'm interested in. Is the homework is actually not happening after the lecture. The homework is happening before the lecture. And the lecture is a video. And then all there really is the thing that's driving, the machine that drives the whole thing, is the conversation, which you're not ready for until you've done all these other things. You've watched the video, you've done the thing, you even discussed it amongst yourselves, you've done all these other things, and then you get to a discussion with a true expert, and that conversation can move very quickly. Go ahead, Sky, and then Cara, and then John.
So we've been approached by a cruise line with Madeline's experience to start doing this concept in that environment. I still don't know who's on a cruise ship, but we'll be reporting back soon.
Cooking is just such a fun one to consider doing with lots of people, because we all have kitchens, or most of us have kitchens that we can play with. Go ahead, Cara.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, I think of education as not a magic pill that, like, a game is the best way to learn math, or for me, a game is the best way to learn anything. It is, like you were saying, Alex, like giving people the written instruction, the video, and something else that, and I think that that's what teachers do, is that when a student comes to you and says, I'm having a hard time with something, they find a different way. Like, maybe a video isn't the best way for that specific student. They need the written instructions. And I mean, just not to throw a huge wrench in there, but assessments are one way. And one of the ways that I found that video was an amazing tool is that I assessed people using video, and what came out of it was that certain students proved to me that they did understand the concepts, that they couldn't take a test on it that was multiple choice, but when you gave them a video and asked them to explain what was going on in it and to actually tell me their observations, they did it. And that to me is like where it's like, okay, we've got different learners, yes, but different subjects too, and different times of your life. It's all
well. And we're trying to figure this out. Like, my son was having a lot of trouble in school, and his teacher just took the time to sit down and talk to him, and it was clear that he knew he wasn't doing the work, so we have to work on that. But he was clear that he knew all the subjects. Like, he knew, like, if she talked to him, and so his grade got bumped because he knew what he was supposed to learn. He just wasn't following the instructions. So we have to figure that out. But he's not failing anymore because it's clear that it was in his head. It just wasn't being expressed. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to answer Paul's question, saying you would do that as soon as you could raise the dough. I'll mute myself now.
Oh, punishing.
All right. Oh, wow. All right. Next question.
All right, moving on. Tony Adamopoulos from Missouri says, recommendations for an external DVD Blu-ray drive for a modern Mac. Purpose is to grabbing bits of video from legacy media for classroom use.
Go ahead.
Yeah, some of those.
Roscoe?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, doesn't Apple still? I think Apple still sells a super drive. I'm pretty sure they do.
I don't know if SuperDrive does Blu-ray though. It does DVD and CDs. I'm not sure it has Blu-ray capabilities, so that might just be software. And sometimes commercial DVDs do have the old form of copy protection, and there's plenty of ways to work around that. But just understand that you might put a disc in, and it might look terrible on screen, and you can't get it clear, and that's what's happening.
Next question.
Moving on to John Krager of Berkeley. Has Zoom updated the protocol for presetting breakout rooms? The process has not yet worked for me. I want to create several preset teams for my high school English classes. The CSV step in the process has snagged so far.
I have to admit, when Grant says that he does it manually, I think it may not be working. You know, like for everybody. Like when Grant is like, you know, this is probably the most technical user of Zoom I've worked with ever. When he says, "Oh, it's just easier just to drag people into the rooms. It doesn't take very much work." I'm like, that probably is an area that isn't working yet. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I was going to say our phys ed teachers teach large groups of kids. Like they have between 60 and 80 kids per period. And they wanted to predetermine the breakout room so that they could have smaller groups of kids working on independent projects and stuff. And we tried doing it, and we found out that our problem was that the students don't have individual Zoom accounts. They have a join code. So they join with the join code and they have a name. And even if you have that username, it doesn't, you have to have a registered user account to use that CSV file. And then it has to be perfectly formatted or else it won't go at all. So it was just a bigger waste of time than to, you know, the thing that saved us was the letting kids choose their breakout room, because we're like, go into your breakout room. If you don't go to your breakout room, then you won't get counted for attendance. And it was much faster than, you know, trying to pre-sort them.
Just let them. Yeah, exactly. Distributed process. Next question.
Ken Kersey says, how can we make Zoom rooms work in a classroom? You need multiple displays or designate one person to control the content?
Go ahead, Benjamin.
I would carefully consider whether you need a Zoom room in your classroom. At least in my school, where we've been putting some kind of Zoom application, we've bought a whole bunch of used old Mac Airs, and they just run Zoom, and they have a webcam, or we connect fancy webcams to them. But the same idea applies. You don't necessarily need a Zoom room to make an effective space for Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I mean, Benjamin, I want you to come speak to my administrators. That's a good answer. Because it essentially kind of feels to me like what's happening is the way that we have a Zoom room hooked up to like an OWL camera is sort of like you have 10 people in a conference with their own laptops, and then you have 10 people huddled around like an iPhone and all trying to use that as a device, and you can't see anything. And so, you know, I'm sure there are ways to do it, but it would probably involve more investment, maybe.
Go ahead, Kai, and then John.
Yeah, it can be a significant investment. I mean, we've done it kind of cheap, but then when you guys see this, you're going to be like, that doesn't look cheap. But for like $2,500, you can get a 65-inch touchscreen. And this is our conference room right here, where you can see that we can whiteboard from this thing, which is huge. And then to the left, there's a second display for pinning. So we can have other people in there that are pinning. And then remotely, somebody can be controlling the camera. Like this is me and Alex, you'll be proud to see that there's Sonics on the walls and on the ceilings.
Well
so
done.
even in this hard, even in this hard, you know, there's a lot of hard surfaces. It's concrete walls, glass table. But then look at how nice it is to whiteboard. Let me get over here to the whiteboard that's controlling the camera. And then here's where I hit whiteboard. And it's so nice to be able to draw this big, and it shows up wonderful. You know, it's a screen share, so it shows up really nice. And then you can email that whiteboard to people at the end. But that's
Guy,
the way that
do you have
we have
that
it
set up like around a conference table though, or do you have like in rows or something like that?
No, so this is the table. So the people sit at the table, and then they're looking at that big display. And then there's another one to the left, and you can see up top is the PTZ camera that's controllable. So somebody remotely could control that PTZ camera, or we can control it from that fancy phone right there. So that or from an iPad. So I'm actually controlling it from an iPad right there. So
what's the maximum number of people that you think this would work for in the room?
Well, I mean, you can always hook up displays to be bigger than this. This is just running off of a Windows PC. You can kind of see it down there, down below. So you can hook up multiple displays, and that could be a projector. So you could have it as big as you want. You can have gallery view 50 feet tall if you want. We just have, on the left side there, we just have one for pinning a person while they're whiteboarding. So on the other side, if somebody's screen sharing, because we do like a lot of Excel stuff, so somebody at home will be sharing their Excel screen on that big screen, and then we still see them pinned on that left screen over there.
John, and then Ben.
Yeah, it's just what Guy is showing there. There's some very impressive Zoom rooms. The Zoom rooms let you have 3 screens, and if one of the screens is as touch sensitive as a whiteboard, I know, Alex, you don't like hybrid events where you have people in the room and remotely. I'm a little loud here, I could say. But it really is pretty impressive when you have the 3 screens and a whiteboard, and then you have people at a similar room at the other end. You really feel like they're connected.
Yeah, and then we have another, sorry, we have another room right in the building, right down the hall where, because of COVID, we used to have 8 people in that room, and now we just push a button and invite the other room, and now we just send 4 people to the other room. And so some people are offsite, some people are in the building, and it just all connects very seamlessly. So it's wonderful technology. I mean, I'm glad to be using it. It's making our life so much easier.
I think that the thing about hybrid events is I just never feel like the people on the far end feel like they're really part of it. Like they're included, but you're all second class citizens. So there's no way to avoid that. Like there's none. Like I've been brought in and done a $200,000 event. They still feel like they're second class citizens because they're not. There's just no way to not be. You don't have equal attention, And so when we want to have people be first class citizens, we put everybody in the same environment. That's the thing. And so they can all be together in a room, or they can all be apart. But as soon as we cross that, as soon as 2 people or 3 people are together, the far side. We see this with MacBreak. It's really hard. Like Leo has to work really hard when there's people in the room. I think MacBreak is a better show now when nobody's in the environment than when we were in there, because as a person the reason I went, I have a good system. The reason I went to Twit to do MacBreak is because it was better for me. Like it was, and so I just know that even with one other person in there, you get more attention. You get and you push the folks that are online back. And so we just have to always be conscious that's what we're doing, and maybe that's what we have to do for a variety of reasons. But we just always know that they're never going to be the same. And after doing hundreds of events, I just don't think doing a lot of work on it. You can make it less bad, but you can't fix it. Benjamin.
Just real quick, the other thing I've learned about this is if you have a classroom full of people with devices, sometimes it can be really great to have every person on Zoom on their device. Yep. Especially if you have let's say a 50-50 split, your remote learners will feel a lot more like they're in the classroom if everybody in the classroom looks exactly like a remote learner.
One of the things that we did, one of the first places that we used Q&A systems was for an event that included the World Bank and a couple other folks and we built this Q&A system, but it was only for people in the room. And it was funny that you couldn't raise your hand. They literally just said, you can't raise your hand. You have to use your laptop. You have to open it up and connect to this local server. You can ask questions there. We'll ask the most popular questions on stage. So everyone has to vote the questions up and down, and we'll do them. And what was funny is there were some people that really wanted to make a point, and it just totally destroyed their ability to do it because they wanted to get up and pontificate, right? They wanted to say their thing about, in this case, bluefin tuna, and the Japanese had some things they wanted to say, and they kept on putting their question in. People kept on voting it down. There's all these diplomats. They're like, yeah, we don't want to hear them talk about that anymore, and so they just kept on pushing this question down, and so they had to keep on figuring out how to rephrase it so it would move back up again. But what was interesting is it forced the audience to agree on what we're all going to talk about. Like we're here for a limited amount of time, and we all want to have a conversation, and you have to be part of that. So it evened out the stakes in that case. And so I do think, to Benjamin's point, is one way that you can lessen the impact of it is having the students that are in the room on the same playing field as the students that are online. But then you're like, I guess, so you can babysit them. It's good to have them come into class, but they have infrastructure. They have somewhere to go when their parents are working. So that would be the argument to bring them in. But again, I would be tempted to say that they should all be on the same platform. Next question.
Moving on to Charles Hodge. Do we know how other countries are doing with remote education?
Go ahead, Emily.
I only have an anecdotal one because the thing is like the whole data that we're using in the United States to force back school is the like, oh, it's working in Europe, but then Europe went through their second spike. So my anecdotal information is that one of my best friends is from Denmark. She moved back to Denmark with her kids in July, and they've been going to outside school. And so they literally set up the campuses, and it was this way anyway in Denmark, already had a culture for it, but they just updated their outdoors. And so the kids are prepared to be outdoors all day. They do have these like pavilions that are heated. So they have like the, heat lamps inside of them going down on the kids for the cooler days. But it's also this idea of, you're going to be outside, so dress for the weather. And they're socially distanced, but they're all back. So if you have a kindergarten of 20 kids, they're all out at these outdoor pavilions, and they haven't had to reclose their schools, even though the numbers around them in bigger cities have gone up. They've been able to continue the in-person learning. And I find it interesting that we didn't think for that. I mean, like, I understand I live in, mid-state New York, and like we get cold and we get rain and we get wind, and it's not always doable. But at the same time, there's a way that we could have done a little more to foster that style instead of trying to force kids back into buildings that haven't been updated since 1960 something. And so therefore like windows don't open and there aren't proper ventilation systems. And so we had to limit the number of kids down to 12 or 10 or 8 in some of the classrooms. But if we had done the outside thing, we would have been able to have more classes and more freedom.
Yep. Next question.
Brian Schwartz says, can the use of gambling be a good motivator for your learning? It's legal.
Yeah, exactly.
You bet.
I can't remember I gave it an example. I have to ask my son again what the thing is that he uses, that I think that they can wager things on it, or they can definitely push back and forth. It's like Kahoot, but it's the other one that there's a lot of gamification within that one, that's because it was written by a 17-year-old, I think, instead of and so there's a lot of chaos. They like it. What?
Gimkit.
Gimkit, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess as a 13-year-old, he vastly prefers Gimkit over Kahoot. Like, and now I don't know if the teachers prefer it, but I guess you can slow other students down and you can push them around. And there's a whole lot of like jostling that goes on, but he says they learn faster on it. And that's his opinion anyway. Go ahead, Emily.
Well, I love Gimkit, but we're not allowed to use it. So they took it away from us this year. But the one thing that they did push out just this week was the Among Us, but they call it, now the imposter or something. They named it something different, not to get in trouble with Among Us. But because Among Us is popular with the kids, they built this entire Gimkit around that. And the kids are in on it, like just super excited to use it. And the teachers that I work with on Twitter that I don't, aren't in the state of New York that are using it are just like, the kids like eat it up. But, Kahoot's the same way with the younger kids, like getting them to stand up in class with their Chromebooks open and they have the board with the question, and then the kids get to, put in an answer, and you can choose whether or not to make it, whether you make it timed or not timed for different style of learning in kids. It does engage the kids. And I think that's a lot of fun. As far as the gambling part goes, I don't know that we want to, set up this like addiction issue early. But yeah, I don't know what they mean by could gambling be used as a good motivator? Like, do you get prizes? Because grading, like I said last week, is already arbitrary in a lot of places. And like what some people take points off for, other people don't. And things that get, used to assess are not across the board assessments. And so like, where's the gambling?
Yeah. I mean, I think that gamification, I guess would be more of a thing that I'd be, like we had I think I've talked about this before, but in Pixel Core, to teach people how to do computer graphics, we'd have them do cubes. It'd be a fleshy cube or an ice cube or a concrete cube or a leather cube. And I would tell a little story. It was like usually a little paragraph of what the cube was. No pictures. I wouldn't show you anything. I would just tell you. It was like a word problem, right? And then everyone would go make their own cubes. But part of it is that everyone would vote on the best one at the end and someone would win. But as much of the winning was how much you showed everybody how you did it. So everyone was like putting up all these work in progresses, and they were all learning from each other. So everyone would learn from how did you do the stitching on that? And then someone would do a little tutorial on how they did the stitching. So it was more of and they would all this huge conversation, and literally be hundreds of people doing this. It was just like this group effort of trying to figure something out and the reason we did cubes, by the way, is so that it would have no outside value. So you wouldn't feel like if I built this car, I could sell it somewhere. It's a cube. It only worked here. And so it had no value other than learning how to do techniques. And it was, so I think that doesn't really solve the gambling problem, but as a gamification, it was you want to think about what they're benefiting from. Is it the result, being able to do something really fast, or is it helping each other, get there? And that created by making the game, helping each other part of the game, it accelerated peer-to-peer learning. That's what we found is that because you were getting graded on that as well. Go ahead, Aaron.
So to completely back up what Emily said, I love the Kahoot concept, and I'm trying to get into GimKit myself. And I know a lot of my kids do play Among Us, because when I ask them to unmute to answer a question, I can hear the music in the background. So I know they're playing it. But I think the biggest, I know, right? So, well, I don't really agree with the gambling concept, but I do believe in the competition aspect, because just making kids want to work harder to beat someone else, huge motivator.
But again, I think that the thing that to look at is that what are you measuring? Because you don't measure what matters. What you measure matters. So when you decide we're going to measure, working with each other or supporting each other, then that becomes what matters. And kids will they'll figure out how to game it as well. That's what happens. But the point is that finding ways to create that behavior in a way that you measure that in the same way, I think can be useful. Last question or comment.
Adds a whole new meaning to the phrase. I think Bob bluffed his way to his bachelor's degree. Benjamin has a comment here. Zoom Ed Update is coming on Monday, December 7th, which will allow co-hosts to move participants from room to room. It'll also be easier to move people from and to the main room, and he has a link to that announcement. So extra features coming to Zoom.
The one that I noticed the most was minor fixes to Big Sur, which I'm hoping is the video problem that we're having with Big Sur. Actually, it's not just Big Sur, it's Catalina. We're having the same problem. So we're having a security issue with Zoom related to occasionally when you come back into a new meeting, your video is coming in from an ATEM Mini specifically, video ceases to work. And the fix is to unplug the ATEM Mini and restart it. The same thing happens with audio with USB connections, and the fix is to turn the audio device off and on. And so that's what we're seeing is a bug, Sky.
Can I do a shameless plug?
Yeah.
Well, tonight at 6 p.m. on YouTube, Pacific time, Madeline Smithberg hopefully won't die in front of a 900-degree pizza oven, and we're going to be learning how to cook together on, we're using StreamYard. And again, we're listening to a lot of these concepts of education when we're engaging people in their homes. We're adding the competition concepts of we're calling two different pizza locations and seeing who's going to get there first, and then we're going to do a taste test. So I'm learning all of this. And again, economically, this is not a hobby, it is our profession, but at the same time, we're not being paid currently. So it's a weird time, and I'm just grateful that you weird people are helping me be more weird, less weird. I'm not sure which.
Are you able to? Is that a scheduled event? Can you post it in the in this
I do.
think Benjamin just popped a link in.
I do, and I can.
So
and yes.
Wait, Benjamin did? Where did he put the link? In
It's
Mukana?
in community events in Discord, and is in Mukana. It says Mad in the Kitchen Live.
Oh, there it is. Okay, great. So there's the link to. Oh, and Rachel Ann put it in there as well. So the links there. As some folks, our group supporting our own. I highly recommend at 6 o'clock at least going there for 2 minutes. That's all I request right now. If you stay, if it's good, stay longer. But the reason for that is it'll improve the. It has something to do with the algorithm. so anyway, even if you like just do Sky a favor and do our group a favor, is go to go up there and just spend 2 minutes watching it. It's Sky's job to keep you longer than 2 minutes, so it's all his fault if you don't stay. But my request is that you go up. I will go at 6 or 6-ish. And go up there and spend 2 minutes. Now, Sky, you have to start on time because we're all coming.
Well,
at 6 now.
we're actually going live pre-show at 5:30. The show
Great.
starts at 6, and so
it's
we're
the same link, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah,
Okay, great.
Everything fires up live. We're going through StreamYard, and we've queued everything to 5:30. We're going to be throwing something out there, but 6 is when Madeline shows up and music and Courtney
Doesn't
does
matter
the
when
voice.
That's an opportunity to do it at 6, but anytime there, just make sure you spend 2 minutes watching it. But 6 sounds like it's the best time. Watch it. I would get there at 5:59 to watch how Sky makes the turnover. And Sky, we're expecting.
Oh my
God. Are you doing normal latency or low latency?
See, you always ask good questions.
So if it's normal latency, we're expecting you. This is the game we play when we do lives.
Oh, okay, I know what you're saying now. Yes,
it's starting right at 0 in the atomic time. So I can just tell you that when I watch this, I'm going to be there at 5:59. I'm going to be watching my watch.
Oh, you're killing
my
me.
atomic clock, and I'm going to be seeing when she starts. When the actual show starts. I don't care what time it is on your side. I want it to be 6 o'clock on my side, which means that you have to calculate the offset. Now, if you want to just guess, nominal offset for regular latency is between 18 and 21 seconds.
Yeah.
The nominal latency for low latency is 9 to 11 seconds, and the nominal latency for ultra low latency, which you should never use, is 2 to 4 seconds. So you can just guess and get those, but you can't really. The way to fix this is that you play a countdown clock or a clock into the stream and look at the stream with the clock next to it. So iPad. Yeah. And you can look at it and you'll just look at how many seconds they're apart.
Well,
because it changes every day. And so you'll hear us a couple hours before an event, you'll hear someone yell out, nominal offset is 19 seconds. That means we're starting our show 19 seconds early. Our kickoff is 19 seconds early. And the easiest way to do that is a countdown clock, because the countdown clock syncs the entire crew to a time that is before the actual time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what's the normal preset default for YouTube? Is it normal latency?
Normal.
Okay, well, then I'm coming in at normal. So I'm going to give myself 20 seconds. So I'll be 2 seconds ahead.
20 seconds.
Two seconds ahead of Alex.
We'll see. No pressure, but we expect, no pressure, but pressure.
Did I mention the 12 jobs, eight-armed octopus, and flaming cats and running chainsaws?
All I hear is excuses. So anyway, the one thing I want to last leave you with is absolutely. Good luck, Sky, and I'll see you. I'll be there at 5:59. I'm setting my clock, so I'm going to be there watching.
My teacher's going to be in the class.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what we should do for Sky? What we should do is we should. I don't think I can do it today. I got some stuff I have to do, but I'll go watch it. But in the future, when Sky does it, we should do the second ear experience where we all watch
party. Yeah,
a watch party and talk about it. Scott, you should not listen to it in live because we'll be tearing apart your show. So you don't want to do that. So we'll talk about.
Our friend will be ruthless.
In 2 weeks, we'll be doing jambalaya, and that's where Victor's already getting his Cajun on. Good. So we're going to be doing it again.
Last thing, just for the teachers that I think I posted this in the past in a general session, but I hadn't posted it here. In Mukana, I just posted, this is something we did maybe 5 or 6 years ago at Hallmark. I thought about it because we were talking about Hallmark cards. This is with an engineer. She's now a senior interactive producer. Her name's Caitlin Jerome. And she's the engineer that shows you how to do this. I was talking about it earlier. Really watch that. because I think that for engineering students, when we were talking about interactive, these are Hallmark cards. You could buy them and send them as a gift to your students. They're like little cards, or tell the students to go out and buy them or whatever. But they have electronics in them. And what she does is she tells you how to tear it apart and turn it into something else. But what you learn along the way is all the electronics and all the bits and pieces and everything else. But I thought about it as a great example of when we're talking about how do we get people to do things interactively, and how do we have them, it doesn't have to be expensive. You could learn a lot. I learned a lot watching this when we were shooting this at Hallmark, and there's a longer video you can watch about all the stuff they go through to build Hallmark stuff, which is really fascinating in itself. But the part that I put into it is a direct link to some part in her section. She's an amazing, by the way, also kind of an amazing teacher. Like we all watched her, and we were just to watch. She's a theater major and an engineering major. So what we're seeing is this magic mix of someone who has, who's just the right mix of smart and can project and be funny and everything else all in the same bit. So as just a reference point, and I've after this, I think I had a job in Kansas City. I got to hang out with her a little bit, and she works with the students to do the first robotics stuff. So she teaches them how to, do that stuff as well. But I would highly recommend looking at it as a thought process of being able to send inexpensive things to kids and then being able to dig into something relatively deep. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in that area. So anyway, just wanted to throw it out there. Nikki, you look like you're ready for the end of the show. What time is it? What time is it in the Philippines?
1:45.
So it's about your time when I got here last night. So anyway, thank you all. This is still my favorite conversation. So hopefully I don't talk too much. Sometimes I get excited. I think about it a lot. Anyway, but I really appreciate all the educators. I love the fact that we have this whole group of educators and students that are becoming part of our. I love the fact that we have a student actually in it, giving us feedback from that side is great. So, but thank you to everyone. I love, it's so great to have teachers, instructional designers, administrators, deans, all these things kind of, mixing and talking about it from different angles. So thank you for taking your time out on Saturday mornings, and hopefully we're making it worth your time. But really appreciate having you all here. And so thanks for being part of this. And we'll see you all tomorrow for some of you.
Thanks.
And otherwise, for some of you, we'll see you next Saturday.
Thank you, Alex. Great show. Another great show in the books.